When was a job applicant perfect until you Googled them? Hiring private tutors to work with middle school students. Had a great conversation with a girl. She stressed how much she wants to be a role model for young girls, basically exactly what we were looking for. Then I Googled her, and the first picture on her Facebook is her doing a line. I wasn't the hiring manager, but my teammate was. A candidate came through that he and some other members interviewed and seemed pretty okay for the job until they checked her out. Turns out she was already suing the company, yes, the one she applied for a job for, so my teammate ended up not going with her in the end. This kid, early 20s, comes in for a job and seems normal enough. Google him and he was wanted in another state for stabbing a St. Bernard to death. I was interviewing a much older guy for a similar position of mine. Everything seemed okay and he was our best candidate. Before moving forward, I did a quick Google search only to find out that he was fired from his previous job because of stealing $5,000 worth of computer equipment. My director hired him anyway. Did everything work out? The original poster can't answer because he got his computer stolen. I wasn't the hiring manager, but I was talking to him about a couple of interviews he had coming up. He said that he looked up one guy and found out that he'd been arrested previously for various identity theft and credit card fraud crimes. This position involved taking payments from customers, among other things, so obviously this guy would not be hired, but that had to have been an awkward interview. I was a restaurant manager and the owner hired this guy as a chef without doing basic research. This happened a few times. Anyway, the guy said he'd won several awards and worked with celebrities, stuff like that. And he was a total jerk to everyone on staff. I decided to Google him myself. First hit is a mugshot from a substance arrest, then more articles, one concerning how he lied about getting a James Beard award from a previous restaurant he had worked at, a comment about him owing $25,000 or something to his former boss. The only positive restaurant review he had was from 1990. I came in after the weekend to show my boss this stuff and learned he'd already been fired the night before for exposing himself to one of the waitresses. What do we even do before Google? Silver lining is that in this day and age, at least this sort of guy is going to have a tougher and tougher time finding places that will take him on with that very public track record. I worked for a staffing agency. A guy is hired and comes in for background and substance screening. He has lots of priors, but he was working in a kitchen, so we got the okay to continue the process. It wasn't until the substance screening that he seems to get a little nervous. I tell him that we're going to do the screen now and he asks to put it off until Monday. Typically, we'd want to do it same day so they could start work, but this was like 4:45 on a Friday and we just wanted to go home, so we said yes. Monday rolls around and he shows up. He takes the test and it comes up positive for green herb, white snow, and a bunch of other stuff. We told him that we test multiple things and that white snow also showed up. We asked him if that was a surprise. He told us, "I do dabble in that, but I just thought this was a test for Mary J." We politely said that we couldn't hire him. There are so many weird stories from working at a staffing agency, believe me. This was back in the pre-Google era, but I think it fits the question. Family owned a trucking company. Literally everyone in my immediate family has or had a commercial driver's license. It was Mum's turn to take the newbie for a road test pre-hire. During that road test, they were involved in an accident. They were hit while stopped, so it wasn't actually his fault. The company was based out of Indiana. The accident happened in Illinois. The newbie gets arrested on the spot. We came to find out he has warrants that hadn't been out long enough for the background check service we used to get them yet. One of the warrants, stalking a female dispatcher from the previous trucking company he worked for. So yeah, the police came just to take the accident report, did standard wants and warrants check, and homie got a new set of bracelets. Had a guy apply for an entry-level post with us recently. His CV was okay, so we offered him an interview. Social media seemed okay too. He never turned up for the interview. Couple of weeks later, there's a story about him in the local paper. Turns out he was living at the local boarding house and was found in the kitchen one morning, totally wasted, wearing nothing but a pair of socks. When a couple of women who also lived there tried to escort him back to his room, he got violent and attacked them. Given the dates stated in the paper, he didn't turn up because he'd been in jail at the time of the interview. His resume has now been added to the "Do Not Touch with a 10-foot barge pole" section in our filing cabinet. Oh, I've got a good one. We had hired a new entry-level graphic designer. Let's call him Will. He had talent and a decent portfolio, but there were some strange things right from the beginning. For example, he'd always come in wearing expensive suits, despite us being a jeans and t-shirt office, and he had a very low-paid position. We didn't care too much about that. No clue how he affords that wardrobe, but that's none of our business. He's a designer and I guess he likes to look nice. The weirdest thing was that he adamantly refused to accept direct deposits for his paycheck. He wanted a physical check every other week. Strange, but okay, designers are just eccentric sometimes. So one evening we were all working really late on a project together. We've got some bottles of wine around, some pizzas. It's miserably long hours, but we're a good team and we're having a good time. All of a sudden, Will looks up from his computer and frickin' runs as fast as he can out the door. Not a word to any of us, he just dashes out. We all look at each other and try and call him. No answer. We finish up the project and go home wondering still what had just happened. The next day, Will doesn't come into the office. He doesn't come in the next day either. We try calling his emergency contact, but don't get any response from that either. So we Google him, and that's when we see the FBI press release. Turns out he was arrested about 500 miles from our office a few hours after he ran out. I guess he got a tip that the FBI was onto him and decided to make a run for it. His scam was pretty weird. He exploited a gimmick in how direct deposits work. Most payroll companies at the time would deposit the salary and shortly afterward withdraw the funds from the employer's bank account. So, he'd set up fake companies with a few highly paid fake employees, set up a fake bank account for them, and then set up direct deposits. When the payroll came through, he'd quickly transfer the funds to his own account and then disappear. He did this 3 or 4 times with different companies, as I understand. It's a stupid scam and easy to track, which is why he got caught. I don't recommend that you try it, especially now that most systems work differently. Turns out he'd been defrauding payroll companies for years, to the tune of about $1 million. That's why he didn't want direct deposit for his paycheck. What he didn't know was that we processed our physical checks through the same payroll company as our direct deposit, and they reported his new address to the FBI. Whoops! As far as I know, he wasn't trying to scam our company. He was either trying to hide out for a while, or he'd burned through his stolen money and needed to get a job. I hired a girl and she interviewed well, but the first day she threw up some red flags. I figured maybe I was misjudging or misinterpreting. People started missing money, and one day one of my belongings disappears, which had never happened prior to her hiring. She was insulting everyone and making customers uncomfortable, and I wanted her gone. Less than 4 full weeks from her start date, but I didn't want to pay unemployment. I finally do a search. There are arrest records in multiple states involving domestic attacks and theft. She ended up saying she could just commit the unspeakable act on one of my barely legal employees, so I was able to fire her based on that. Lesson learned. Check everyone out no matter how well they interview. I guess not. You heard it here, folks. Doesn't matter if they're Ivy League, a gleaming golden personality, and multiple photos of them handing off large checks to charitable organizations. Google those people and find out if they're secretly running illegal distilleries with child labor. I used to manage a group home for developmentally disabled adults. I was in charge of hiring the staff that we needed to make the house run properly. I saw a name come across my desk that I had to interview, and I instantly looked them up. Turns out, this was a girl that had an obsessive crush on me from years ago, and on her social media it looked like she still did. I was in a panic because she was basically stalking everything I did, and I really couldn't back out because it was 5 minutes before the interview. She came in and it was so weird. She acted normal. We interviewed in a professional manner for about 15 minutes. I showed her around and thought, wow, maybe she's done some maturing. I should just let this go. Then we got back to my office. I started a sentence like, well, Linda, it's been a pleasure having you here, and oh, no, we aren't done yet. You think you can ignore everything like you don't know what's going on? I know where you work now. I know where you live, and I'm going to keep calling. There was more she was saying while I told her to kindly leave, but a phone call to the police, as well as a restraining order, kept her away from my work and my life. I was hiring for our night shift, like shifts ending at 2 or 3 a.m., and she was willing to work anything and looking for about 25 hours per week. This was absolutely what the company was looking for. She had mentioned that she was grieving her little boy who passed 2 weeks ago and needed to do something to occupy her time. She finished her 1 day of computer training and stopped showing up after that. Later in the week, she sent me an email saying she wasn't ready to come back to work like she thought, which was actually understandable. My assistant manager and I decided to look her up only to find out that she had multiple GoFundMe pages set up for her sob story with different amounts of time that the supposed child had been dead for. Her Facebook was full of selfies and party photos. She ended up asking for the job back a few months later and we shot her down pretty quick. I recently Googled her name and found that all the GoFundMe pages had been taken down and her social media profiles deleted and privatized. The story took place early last year. Where I work, they hired a guy who was great at the job and a nice, quiet employee. His background check took forever to clear for some reason, but it ultimately came back clean. Eventually, he said he needed to take a day off for court, but he just never came back after that day. Upon looking into it, he'd been found guilty of very inappropriate behavior with a minor on more than one occasion. That must have been why it took so long to come back. They were unsure if it should be reported since it was pending. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Oh, we had a near miss. It was a senior hire. We were talking about him and how something seemed a little off when we Googled him. It was like he didn't exist at all, and then the odd super positive tidbit of information that was always a bit too much of a stretch to be completely believable. I mean, 1 or 2 people saying that you're the best thing on earth is one thing, but this was like all you've got with these sporadic, hypermanic observations. One of the junior members of the team pipes up at this point. She's overheard what we're talking about. Turns out she's worked the last 2 places he worked at, and he's like a locust. He's extremely good at his job, but an absolute nightmare in all other ways. Misconduct, bullying, turning up wasted. He has a really niche skill set, and there are always more roles than people to fill, so he hops along, bullies everyone out of their role in his team, brings in his entourage to the point where almost anyone normal rage quits because the atmosphere is so toxic, and then when HR try to step in, he hits them with a constructive dismissal case and drags lawyers in, so there's no paper trail. She said he'd done it at her last job and the one before that. It's one of those things that once you know, you start to notice stuff. So at events when someone mentioned this guy's name, half the table would just give each other a look, and others would have no idea. It's not quite an open secret, but it's definitely on the grapevine anecdotally, if not formally. I'm so glad we dodged that bullet. I heard we'd hired a new guy, so I looked him up on LinkedIn. Turns out he was just leaving a job where my father-in-law worked. I sent Pops a text and asked him about the new hire and opinions on him, and didn't get an answer. When I went for dinner the following weekend, I asked again. Turns out this new hire said he was leaving his former job to go and take care of his ailing mother in Africa. His former company said not to worry about it, take an unpaid leave and come back when you can, however long that takes. I went in on Monday and told my boss. He didn't fire him immediately, but when he didn't perform well in his job after a couple of months, he got canned, and then proceeded to go back to his former company and tell them he was back from Africa. They did not rehire him. I was the intern responsible for checking references and running backgrounds at our company, and this was in my first week where I was just learning how to go about things. This guy did great in the interview, so I got the go-ahead to run a background check and call his references. Something popped up in his background, so I had to call the police station to figure out how to get a copy of the police report, since whatever happened had just happened. I talked to someone on the phone and gave them his name, and who I was and what I was calling for. After doing so, whoever I was talking to didn't know how to go about obtaining the information on her end. She put me on a brief hold, then took a callback number and promised to call me back with some info. Well, it's a good thing neither of us knew what to do because I received a call from the police department less than an hour later. An officer told me, "I'm not really supposed to be doing this, but I just wanted to let you know that your guy has been arrested for carjacking a woman, and that woman works at your company. Wouldn't you know it?" The carjacking had taken place around the same time as his interview. The cop saw the company name and the guy's name and warned us, and I'm so grateful he did. At the time, I was a makeup artist that was flying to New York to work with a photographer. Right before the trip, communication dropped off completely. He wouldn't respond to Instagram or calls or emails either. A few weeks later, happened to catch his name in the paper. He had been arrested for a crime so awful that the narrator can't even say it on YouTube. Yep. Take it from me, folks, we can at least say the words for most of the world's crimes and offenses here, although we have to dance a little bit around the wording of ones where flirting goes way too far or the unspeakable act. But this one, I can't even talk about the subject matter in the most abstract terms. Suffice to say, it's sickening and awful, and this guy deserves to go away forever. Good resume. Former military, we were going to call him for an interview, but Googled him first. Turns out he was arrested for arms trafficking. The report said he'd stolen 2 or 3 small arms as well as a Stinger missile system from the base he was stationed at. The people he set up to sell the stuff to were undercover officers. I just asked the other manager if he remembered that guy's name so I could find the report. He didn't, but he reminded me that some of the stuff that was listed as being in his possession was a number of flak jackets and a Humvee. Years ago at my previous company, a few co-workers met a young man interested in a software development position with us at a local trade conference and invited him to come interview with us later that afternoon. Said fellow eagerly provided the link to his blog. Top post was about being recently released on probation after a stint for illicit substance sales and how his upstream supplier was kind enough to front him some startup capital and some new inventory to resume his little side gig, as his previous stash was allegedly confiscated during a previous visit by law enforcement. Co-workers and I decided to read a few more posts just to make sure we didn't confuse this guy with the wrong person and inadvertently got the wrong link to his blog or something. Sure enough, a few photos and some older posts confirmed it was the same guy. We didn't manage to get much additional work done for the rest of the afternoon between speculation as to when his apparent commitment to full public disclosure would land himself back in the clink and whether we ought to even mention having checked out his blog. We all had to try very hard to keep a straight face when he did come in for his interview. He actually was very reasonably knowledgeable when it came to the job, and somehow we'd managed to completely avoid the question of his side gig in recreational pharmaceutical sales. We gave him an A+ for honesty and an F for good sense. He was not extended an offer of employment. There was a time I was screening tenant applications for a room for rent. I had a bad roommate experience before, and I wanted to make sure I got the right fit for a tenant. I was exchanging emails with this nice lady who was eager to move. I explained to her the process and that a background check was needed to be done by our property manager. But I had this weird gut feeling about this lady, so I googled her name, and a bunch of arrest records popped up, including domestic disputes. That was a no for me, and I politely declined her application. I share my dad's name, so when you Google my name, you pull up his exploits, stuff like being arrested for having 7 semi-trucks worth of green herb in his driveway. Thanks, Dad. Had a guy come in to apply for a dumper truck job. Seemed okay, very well spoken, clean cut, not the kind you see usually applying for a job driving a dumper truck. He told me he had a PhD in psychology and had his own DWI and addiction counseling business, but his wife divorced him and he lost everything. So I googled him. He wasn't lying, but the story went a bit deeper than that. Turns out his wife had been cheating on him. When he found out where the boyfriend lived, he snorted almost enough white snow to give himself a heart attack, went to the guy's house where his wife's car was parked. He shot 30 rounds from an automatic weapon into the house and the car with them inside the house. Somehow he got off with only 6 months in jail and probation. He didn't get the job. I suppose you wouldn't hire him. How can you trust someone who can't even hit with a full mag to correctly meet all of his goals for that one job? We hired an ex-policeman as a technician in our trade field. He seemed willing and able, and he passed stringent background and driving backgrounds. He said he was wanting to be out of law enforcement because of the scrutiny officers were under and needed a career change. This guy looked like a cop. Anyway, he worked for a couple of months and did okay at his role, until we got a call saying he'd blacked out behind the wheel, crossed several lanes and medians and wrecked his company truck into a tree, and finally a house. We went to pick him up and assess the damage. The firefighters agreed it might be due to dehydration and no charges were filed. Then we googled his name. This officer had been charged with DUI in the middle of the day a year prior for wrecking his cruiser in basically the same way. On that day, paramedics discovered he confessed to drinking whiskey all day during his patrol. The guy was an extreme but functioning alcoholic. Luckily, he was still inside his 90-day probation period, so termination was simple. The guy sent me his resume, but instead of sending it as an attachment, he emailed me a snapshot of his resume he'd stored in his photos. In the photos below it was him smoking doobies and drinking 40s with his friends. And no, I'm not against green herb or booze. My main priority is to protect the company, and the job entailed driving company vehicles, machinery, operating equipment, stuff like that. I can't knowingly hire someone who'll fail a P-test if he crashes, as the insurance company won't pay it. He was dismissed because he emailed me with a screenshot from his phone as a resume, not as an attachment. Also, his email said, "Hey, I saw this job on Craigslist. My number is this. I live here. Can I start ASAP? HMU." That was word for word, by the way. He was so well-spoken, he had big dreams, was tech-savvy. I was about to hire him on the spot. A Google search pulled up a mugshot for identity theft. We didn't hire him. I was interviewing a chef for my business. The interview went great. He had an excellent resume. Worked at some of the top restaurants in the world, 3 Michelin star kind of places, even did a short cooking test with some spare ribs, and they were incredible. There was some stiff competition though, so eventually we decided to look at everyone's Facebook profiles. One of his old profile pics was him at Mardi Gras parade dressed as Pikachu with a big adult toy strapped on his front. So yeah, he got the job. I was head of HR for an answering service company at one point in my life. Staff turnover was atrocious, and most of the resumes that came through were from people that had zero job history or were chronic job hoppers. Imagine my surprise when Renee's resume crossed my desk. With the exception of a 10-year gap on her resume, she appeared to be an ideal candidate. Then I found the articles from a newspaper about 2 hours away. That 10-year gap? Serving time for kidnapping and murder. With an axe. A literal frickin' axe murderer. I hired her, and as far as I know, she's still there. Model employee, strong work ethic, positive attitude. 10 out of 10 would hire an axe murderer again. We were narrowing the group down to 2 or 3 candidates. We then Googled, Facebooked, and LinkedIn'd them to get to the one that was in the top 2. Their Facebook was completely open to the public to view everything. Lots of racist, sexist comments and risque photos of them in some highly compromising positions. That was too bad. Their resume was actually pretty good, just not something we'd consider appropriate for us. What never going to happen to me event happened to you. I won a raffle in 4th grade. The prize was a duffel bag. I was so happy. I just won a motorcycle at work about a week ago. I've got 2. The first was my father having an affair. The second was driving 8 hours for a job interview, only to realize that I had PM and AM mixed up, so I missed the interview by 12 hours. I cried the whole way back home. Getting my house raided by the police. Was living with a roommate at the time, and he was a bit of a green herb user, but not a dealer. We think that he bought something from someone who was being watched, and the cops thought that my flatmate was in distribution. I got shot. I definitely didn't see that one coming. I was walking in downtown Montreal a few weeks back, and someone came up to me on the street and asked if I wanted to buy any substances. As a kid growing up, I was led to believe this would happen all the time, but this was the first time. This happened to me in downtown Red Deer. I told the guy no, I don't do that. In reality, I was just highly suspicious of this guy. I wonder if he was a narc or wanting to steal money. I mean, who the heck sells or buys from a random person in the street these days? What a minefield to navigate for both parties. Remember, just say no, unless there's a bunch of cool kids doing it. When I was 18, I was offered 10 grand to marry a girl from Sweden. I'm American, and she wanted to stay in the US. I didn't go through with it. As someone who's lived in both countries, I've got to say that she was either an Americanophile or, more likely, not actually from Sweden. It may be cold there, but the standard of living is through the roof compared to most places, especially the States. Sorry, Americans. Being in a long-distance relationship. I always thought people who did it were insane or even desperate. Turns out you can have every option in the world and still only want the one person who lives far away from you. Fathering a disabled child. As devastating as it is to find out your kid is disabled, it's crazy how it stops being about how it would impact your life and it shifts entirely to how it will impact their future. At least, that's how it was for me. Becoming a widow at 25. 3 years this late October. I miss her every day. She got sick and led up to having heart failure. She got a ride home from work. I had to drop off a coworker whose car had broken down. I would have been the one to pick her up. Someone didn't see her until too much time had passed. Realizing that someone I love was part of one of America's many weapon-related tragedies. I watched the news for a few hours, saw that there was a siege situation in the mall. Hey, isn't that where my sister's name works? Is she working today? 3 people dead, 1 expected to be the perpetrator. Oh, well, there's hundreds of people in the mall at any time. I just wonder why she hasn't called us yet. The event took place around a food court. She works near the food. Could have been anyone, though. Who knows? Here's a picture of the bullet-riddled walls and witness reports. Wow, this is on every news station. It's been a few hours. Where is she? It took place on the upper-level food court. Oh crap. The only stores up there are hers and some kids' shops. No one with a sane mind would open fire at them, but he wasn't sane, obviously. You're awful. You're just wishing that little kids were dead instead of your sister. Every person would, wouldn't they? It took place in, they named the store she worked at. It's a populous store. There could be lots of people there. 1 female, 2 male, one of which is the expected perpetrator. She works in there. She's a female. Female, early 20s, white, expected to work at the store. That's her exact description. But lots of girls look like that who work there. And then the phone rang. Went to my first club, 16 to 21-year-olds allowed, on senior week about 2 weeks after turning 18. Met a girl who actually seemed into me. We left and ended up doing the deed on the beach. Turns out she was 14 and lied to me when I asked her earlier, even showing me a fake ID. But that didn't matter to the cops, of course. Another of America's tragedies at my high school. It's pretty messed up to think about how one person who hardly anybody knew could affect so many people's lives so unexpectedly. Falling in love. My parents can't really stand each other, so I just assumed I'd end up the same way. A while back, I dated a guy for nearly a year before finding out he was actually living with his real girlfriend of about 8 years. As soon as I found out, I introduced myself and told her, crying, and she just shrugged her shoulders and rolled her eyes. Didn't care at all. It was surreal. None of our mutual friends knew or suspected either, which makes me feel slightly better about my lack of character discernment skills. I never thought that I'd dislike the person I've become. I'm not even a terrible person or anything, I just don't like myself. I won a new bike in 2nd grade during a raffle. I remember I was walking out of school when I heard my name on the intercom saying I won. Holy crap, what a day that was, right before the Christmas holiday too. I thought car accidents only happened to other people, and then I let my friend drive my car. I guess I was kind of right? Alcohol and substance addict. 18 months clean and sober though, so that's pretty cool. Coming home to find out my significant other had cleared their stuff out of my apartment, turned off the cable, internet and phones, and wouldn't answer their cell. We're no longer together. Lost my 32-year-old brother to a sudden heart attack. I thought nothing bad would ever happen to me, and now my family is pretty mashed up. Discovering I was a victim of a horrible home situation growing up. I always thought my family was perfect. A friend of mine who I'd known for half my life, 14 years, was also my roommate. We're also old army pals. He's very dependent on having a girlfriend, so when he starts dating a new girl, everything else ceases to be important. He's always been this way. A couple of months ago, we're still roommates, but he stopped communicating with me slowly over the course of a couple of weeks and starts to sleep over at his girlfriend's house more and more often. I go on a trip to Muscle Shoals, Alabama with my dad on a Friday and return Sunday evening. It was hot as heck, so I went to my friend's room to see if he might have an extra fan I could borrow. I opened his door and all of his stuff was gone. He waited until I was gone for the weekend and skipped out on the lease, and all without saying a word to me. He could have just told me he was moving out, but he just left me holding the bag after avoiding me for a few weeks. I thought I'd done something wrong, but after thinking about it and talking to our other friends, who he also bailed on and wasn't speaking to, I realized he must have had some serious emotional problem with latching onto women and feels like everyone else can screw off when he has a girlfriend. I just hope he's doing all right and everything works out for him. Well, I suspect and kind of hope things didn't work out with that partner because it seems like they were a pretty bad influence on his life, regardless of how good a person they were. I do hope that it ended and he got help and learned to treat others better, because he and the people around him would benefit from that. Emotional and mental breakdown. Trouble having a baby. We've been trying for years, it's a drag. Not the bedroom part, that part's been great. Getting cheated on. Getting addicted to smoking. Frick. A girl that asked me out? I was so surprised I didn't know what to do. Turned out we weren't compatible and I'm alone again, +1 to life experiences. Brett the Hitman Hart gave me his sunglasses as a kid when he came to my town. Stands to this day as the best moment of my life. Getting caught cheating on a huge test. You never think you'll get caught cheating if you cheat. You're always supposed to be afraid of getting caught cheating, but because you take those precautions to not get caught, you never actually think it's going to happen. But be honest, if you got caught, you wouldn't even know what to do. You'd have an idea, but the minute it happens, you can bet your butt that you'll stumble your words together unless you're a certified pathological liar. God forbid it's the SATs or some other state or national test. The odds are against you too. Once they suspect you of cheating, there isn't crap you can say against it besides, no I didn't. And at that moment you proceed to crap your pants and wait for their verdict on whether or not you should continue your life. 6th grade was frickin' rough, man. I had a ghost poop. I mean, I've heard stories about it, but to experience the crap yet be so clean for the wipe, it really is a haunting experience. Dropped my phone in a goddamn toilet. It happened last summer. I had an iPhone 4 for 3 years before it finally fell into the watery abyss and died. I then finally upgraded to the 5S, which was thankfully half the price from the Verizon upgrade price, because of the iPhone 6 release. I used to make fun of people who dropped their phones in toilets. I mean, I still do, but I used to too. I have a positive one: graduating high school and college without being on ADD med. I had it drilled into me by my mother and psychologists as a child that I'd never be able to get through high school, let alone college, without being on meds. I'll admit my grades could be better, but I'm a 3L in law school, and while school has been hard, I've never had to feel trapped inside my own mind, and all of my success has been my own. I mean, I'm kind of the opposite here. My parents told me all through elementary and middle school I was probably ADD and should look into meds. I did just fine, slightly above average in high school, B student in college. I had trouble focusing consistently and was fidgety all the time. But I worked, was in a fraternity, and played club sports. I just assumed I wasn't as focused of a student as I should have been. Went to grad school, that didn't work, studied and still seemed mediocre. So I went to a psychiatrist with absolutely no expectations just to feel it out. I even told the doctor I'm not expecting anything, but I was tired of just assuming I was completely fine. Ended up being diagnosed with moderate ADHD. I know it's one of the most overdiagnosed disorders, but it's made school and general productivity much easier at times. Being in a horrible relationship. It was when I was first in college. He snuck it up on me with mental and emotional attacks at first. I was already getting sick of that when he pushed me, which was the last straw. I came out of it with some baggage, but I was very lucky not to have it worse. I was a criminal justice major in college, and then one night I went to jail while tripping on mushrooms, and my teacher drove me to said jail. Depression. 2 years or so in, and I really can't remember when it came on. Just sorta snuck up on me. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Turning out gay. Now, granted, for 10 or 11 of those years before it happened, I didn't even really have a concept of what gay was. For that span of time, I never thought it would happen to me because I never thought of it at all. But between learning the concept and me finding out that that was me, I didn't ever really think it would happen. Coming out to myself was a gloriously horrible crap show. Up to that point, I was perfectly fine with and supportive of other people who were gay. I didn't see a reason why I shouldn't be, considering that their personal lives weren't any of my business. But when I realized I liked guys, that was my business, and I didn't want any of it. I'd always wanted to grow up normal, and get married and have kids of my own and not worry about having to fight for every inch of progress in my life. I mean, I was a middle-class white boy, the jackpot combination of Western society. Who would seriously trade that in? Keep in mind that this was my thought process when I was 14 or 15. I've long since come to my senses. And I'm getting a lot of replies from people currently in this position. I want you to know that I feel for you guys, and it really, really, really does get better. If you ever need support or advice, I strongly recommend checking out the LGBT subs on Reddit. There's a whole network of them catering to a wide array of interests, so even if you don't feel like a stereotypical gay, you can find something that suits you there. You can start at Reddit LGBT. My picture being randomly taken from Google Image, horribly photoshopped to make me bald, and used for an ad for a crappy hair product in Congo. Someone from there recognized my face on the ad because I have a popular blog. Still blows my mind. I still can't believe women actually allowed me to stick my eggplant in them, and for that, I'm grateful. Many of us feel the same way, my friend. It takes us a few rounds to realize that if it keeps happening, maybe we're not the horrible freaks that we think we are. Becoming a smoker, doing substances, being diagnosed with a mental illness, realizing I'm bisexual, and failing uni a couple of times. Dated someone who turned out to be a sociopath and ruined my life. It's better now. Losing my home and everything I owned in a fire. It happened right before Thanksgiving last year. Still haven't really recovered financially or emotionally. Three-way. Boom. I got the crap beat out of me, not literally, while traveling abroad. I was in Madrid, drunkenly walking back home, and these guys were like, "Sup, man, you some kind of African?" I told them no. They had a bottle of booze and wanted me to take a shot. I declined and they got all mad and said no Africans should turn them down. One of them grabbed me and I threw a punch, tried to fight them off, but there were 3 of them. I woke up in an alleyway across the street at 5 a.m. or so. They didn't steal anything, just beat me down. Just the dark turn my teen years took. The self-injury, the inner rage hospitalizations, it's like living in a post-apocalyptic world. Sometimes I think back to when I was little. I know that version of me never would have thought that this was who I'd become. I really let that little kid down. I used to be so sure of who I was, what I'd do, where I was going. Everyone always said I was smart and that I looked like I had my crap together, but the truth is I haven't been that right since I was 6. My parents divorced and no one really knows what that does to a kid who's quiet and out of the way. I lost my confidence. I wasn't as good as before, I had to fake it. Be someone else at school for attention. After so long at faking, you don't really know who you are anymore. You could be anyone. Your self-image gets all smudged. Anyway, long story short, too late I know, all of this is on me now. People say the past dies, but it doesn't really. It breathes on my skin, and I have to find a way to move ahead, regardless of what happened. Because it's death to stay behind, and to watch everyone else move ahead in life without you. That I would lose a lot of my self-confidence. It's a long story, but I'm currently trying to force myself to become better and believe in myself. I was in high school walking home drunk after a party, holding an empty handle of Fireball whiskey. I was stumbling all the way home for 2 miles and cars were passing and honking. Drunk as I was, my brain couldn't figure out what they were trying to tell me. To my luck, a cop turned his sirens on and pulled me to the curb. I sat there laughing my butt off while he called my parents to pick me up. I was once caught doing the deed in the park with someone I was cheating with. She was the girlfriend of my friend at school. At about 8 in the evening, while we were doing the good old doggy behind a wall deep inside the park, a guy approached us and handcuffed the both of us immediately. We both literally cried in front of the police guy to set us free by bribing him money and our mobile phones. At first he said, "Son, that's not how it works here. Wait for the police cars and we'll settle these at the station. Also, I may file charges on you for trying to bribe a police officer." After about an hour of negotiation and after we showed him all of our valuable things and offered it to him as a bribe, the fricking truth was revealed. The police guy was not police. After taking all of our money and phones, he made us raise our hands after he removed the handcuffs and made us turn around. After a couple of seconds, we were both crying with fear from the thought of catching a bullet in the back. And then the guy just ran away, laughing, and yelled, "You lusty motherfrickers got what you deserve! Doing the deed in the park? Ha ha!" Frick. I did get what I deserved for cheating. I'll never do it again. I still remember that guy's face. We were both 17 when this happened. I regret having a girlfriend before high school ended. Too bad it was only a month before we graduated. Actually falling in love with someone. I just never understood how people could get so vulnerable and depend on their significant other that much emotionally. I accidentally took too many substances and ended up in hospital for about 2 or 3 days. I had a tooth abscess and it was the most painful thing I've experienced so far. The dentist gave me antibiotics, but they'd take a while to kick in. I was taking ibuprofen, but it wasn't helping, so I started taking it with some paracetamol and that worked. So I carried on doing that, but throughout the day it started to work less and less, so I was taking them closer together. It got to the point where there was only an hour or 2 between taking them. The thought crossed my mind that I was taking too many, but I was in too much pain to care. Next day, my mum asks me how I'm feeling and how many tablets I took the day before, and she says I probably took way too many, but I think nothing of it. Cut to a few hours later, and I've been in bed all day being ill. So we head to the A&E where I get admitted because the levels in my liver are high and they want to monitor me. My cheek had also become swollen, so there was talks of being transferred to another hospital for surgery. I had 2 doctors check me over, repeatedly asked if I'd attempted to end things, and told I'd need to see the psych team, but I was discharged before that happened. I never thought I'd end up in hospital, let alone for something like that. Sunday, I was driving down the road and a snake crawled out from under my sun visor. I'm very thankful that the author of this comment could send it to us from beyond the grave, because I'm assuming they're dead. If that crawled out near me while I was driving, my reaction would probably end in me either throwing myself out the door or flipping my car and turning it into a crashing fireball on the side of the road. Or both. Having your bedroom life almost completely die immediately after getting married was pretty surreal. I never thought it would happen to me and just sort of assumed it was more of a joke people liked to make. I never thought a person could change so quickly and so drastically. I was severely depressed pretty much ever since I can remember. At 17-ish, I dropped out of high school and I joined the National Guard and went through infantry school, thinking it would make me tougher and stronger. I planned to get a college education with the benefits. Well, they gave me no money for school, so I paid out of pocket, and I never went to class, so I dropped out. I did nothing. For most of my childhood, my dad was making a lot of money, 4-year degree from a prestigious school, and then a law degree from another prestigious school. My mum had 2 degrees as well. We lived very well for a while, but now my dad is jobless, my parents split up, and I live with my mum and little sister. I figured if they couldn't succeed in life, how could I? Well, now I'm on my way. I don't make a ton of money, but I make a decent amount for someone living at home with no expenses. I'm 21. I started an internship with an old business friend of my dad's, meaning to learn a little about IT. I figured I could do the dirty work in exchange for some knowledge. Well, my dad's friend liked me, as did all of my co-workers. What common knowledge went way over everyone's head? That there are no tigers in Africa. I was on safari in Tanzania, and 2 others in the truck were discussing how excited they would be to see tigers. I told them there weren't any, and they looked all disbelieving and crestfallen, like I was spoiling their fun. They had to check with the guide. I have a twin sister. I'm a guy. You'd be surprised how often I get asked if we're identical. Do you say, no, her Johnson is bigger? Started working as a service plumber, and I can't believe how many people are surprised when you say don't put grease down the drain. That's something I grew up with. The mason jar under the sink where you dumped the grease out of the pan. Too many people don't know that it shouldn't go down the drain. Okay, so some frequently asked questions. Number 1. What does grease do to my pipes? Grease, fats, and oils stick to the side and solidify. This causes the inside diameter to decrease and leaves behind a sticky, uneven surface that stuff can't slide over easily. This is especially bad if you use a garbage disposal. Question 2. What do I do with the grease if I can't dump it down the drain? Trash or a jar? Some people save it for cooking, some use a jar to prevent their trash from smelling, some simply dump it outside in their yard. Wipe the pan with a paper towel to further decrease what goes down the drain. Question 3. What about toilets? Crap and crap paper, nothing else. No wipes, not even the flushable ones, are safe. No tampons, no pads, no diapers, no Johnnies. And finally, does hot water help? Not nearly as much as you think. Enough hot water will flush out almost anything, and liquid soap can help too, but in my opinion, it's easier and faster to just use a jar or the trash. I'm not sure how much our viewers are learning from this, but the narrator is getting loads of what are apparently just common sense facts of life. Now I know I shouldn't just be tipping all of my oil down the sink and should maybe get a plumber to check my pipes. So growing up, I always saw the videos of sea turtles or other animals suffering, disfigured, or killed by plastic soda holder rings not being cut before being thrown out. This, of course, stuck with me, and so when I worked in a hospital kitchen, I'd collect the rings from the soda restock on the shift and simply slice each ring. One day, my coworker asked why I did that. I explained, and he just stood there for a moment and went, I never thought of that. My mind was blown. I thought it was common knowledge that these things really jacked up wildlife. He then proceeded to tell all of our coworkers, and I was further shocked that over half of them also didn't seem to know that this was an issue. Apparently, a lot of people don't know that pickles come from cucumbers. I've seen a lot of comments like this on Reddit. They're called pickles, as in pickled cucumber. My friend is also allergic to cucumbers. She ordered a sandwich and told the girl she had a cucumber allergy, and she got pickles in her sandwich and an extra on the plate. We were like, we said no cucumbers, and the waitress said, I know, that's a pickle. When I was a kid, I thought that when people got hurt, it was normal to get a shot, like a syringe. Turns out I have hemophilia, and my mum was really good at making me not feel like I was different. I used to work at a grocery store with a floral and gift department. We also handled balloons. Helium was going through a shortage at the time, and as a retail supplier, we were on lower priority from medical and military purchases. So there was about an 8-month period where we were completely out of helium. I had some version of this conversation at least 4 times. Can I get some party balloons, please? I can blow you up some balloons, but they won't float. Why not? We're out of helium at the moment. Why can't you just use air? I can use that, but they won't float. Why not? No helium. About 5 seconds of stupid face and silence followed by, "What's helium?" That dogs chase animals. I see so many people giving away their dogs because they're chasing my chickens. Duh, they're prey-driven animals. That's literally what most of them were made to do. How mummies were made. Growing up, I was obsessed with ancient Egypt and mummies. Even better, my dad worked as a mortician and would casually tell me how the things they did prevented decay. I wound up doing a presentation in 2nd grade about the process. I couldn't understand why I got sent to the counselor after that. Funnily enough, I'm now in school for archaeology and going on a dig soon. Seriously? I read a ton of books when I was a kid that went into excruciating detail about the mummification process. They know kids love that crap. The geography of the world. I was shocked that a lot of people in my campus thought that Singapore was in Europe. One of my friends thought Mexico was in Europe. I made fun of her all day. Then she recalled the time I said the Nile was in Africa, and with a very serious tone she said, "The Nile is in Egypt, idiot." That the moon can be visible in the daytime. Like, how can you go through life never noticing that? I had this conversation with my mother-in-law. My 2-year-old son said, "Noon," pointing to the sky, and I translated for him, and my mother-in-law says, "Silly boy, the moon is only out at night." Her face was priceless, like he didn't know the words, but he looked at her like, "Okay, but counterpoint, it's right there." Indian is not a language. In India, we have 30+ major languages and hundreds of local dialects. A pony is not a baby horse. I see this revelation a few times a year on the internet. A baby horse is a foal. A pony is a small horse, typically a few different breeds. As a general rule, if an animal's proportions are the same as a full-sized version, you're looking at a small adult, not a child. You can spot a baby horse or foal because they're super gangly and awkward, just like human teenagers. How to use an apostrophe. It's disturbingly common for people to automatically add in an apostrophe when they pluralize a word. Don't put laundry softener in your towel load. The towels will retain it and be unable to absorb water properly. If you've done this already, you may need to wash your towels several times without softener to get it all out. That just because someone speaks a different language, it doesn't mean they're deaf or hard of hearing. Speak slower? Absolutely. Speak 50 decibels louder than normal? Unnecessary. The universal English-speaking tourist symptom. Getting angry that people aren't understanding you and just saying the same thing louder and louder until you're red in the face. "Where can I get some chips, mate?" The print screen button on the keyboard takes a screenshot and loads it into the clipboard. That narwhals aren't really a thing. My parents thought I'd read some fake online article because in what world would a unicorn whale exist? After a few minutes of looking it up on their own, they realized that these weird creatures are in fact real, and their horn is actually one giant tooth or tusk. They can sometimes have two. That reduce, reuse, recycle is an order of operations, not just a phrase. That girls should tinkle after doing the deed. My roommate just got a UTI, and when asked if she peed after doing it, she asked why would she do that. Basic human anatomy. My wife thought that the berries resided directly to the left and right of the twig in male anatomy, like engines on a jet plane. Chickens lay eggs without a rooster being around to breed them. It's weird how many people don't know this. That you have to wash your butt in the shower and put on deodorant every day to keep from smelling like a swamp in the summer. Mixing 2 common household cleaners, bleach and ammonia, makes chloramine gas. I saw some memes saying to mix them as it makes a super cleaner, and I hope that no one bought into it. Warning label. So to add how dangerous this is, chloramine gas is lethal. Breathing it in causes irritation in the lungs and will cause chemical pneumonia. This isn't like breathing in car exhaust and just passing out and not being alive anymore. This hurts a lot. And while I've got your attention, another similar thing people do is running engines and generators in garages. Gas is the invisible killer. The Pelican Man. I used to visit my grandparents' place in Sarasota, Florida as a kid. There was a bird sanctuary there run by the Pelican Man, a bird rehabilitator who had minor fame in the Sarasota metro area. I idolized him. One day when I was about 18, I got to meet him and talk to him. I was over the moon starstruck by him. I was so excited to go home to North Carolina and tell the other kids in my class all about how I met the Pelican Man and how he talked to me. I thought they'd react as if I'd gotten to meet Britney Spears or Harrison Ford. I remember feeling really deflated when I was just met with blank stares because no one outside of Sarasota knew who he was. I should note that his facility closed after his death in the early 2000s, but has since reopened with the same aim of education and bird rehabilitation under the name of Save Our Seabirds. If you're in Sarasota, definitely pay it a visit, and you can read about the Pelican Man himself on their website. Prom is from promenade. Is that like lemonade? That the misuse of antibiotics is a legitimate issue. My girlfriend told me that she never finished her prescriptions because they give her extras, and then if she's feeling sick in the future, she'll take the extras. If you don't finish antibiotics, you're helping create drug-resistant bacteria. Every time I mention the fact that you can get ebooks and audiobooks online through your library, via Libby or Overdrive or some other borrowing services depending on what your library signed up for, there's always someone who's getting it as knowledge for the first time and is amazed. It's a great service, but they do a really bad job of advertising it. Catholicism is Christian. That Puerto Rico is part of the United States. Just for comparison, New Mexico license plates used to read New Mexico, USA because so many people thought they weren't from the US. Toasters have a tray at the bottom that you can remove to clean the breadcrumbs out. I knew about this, but I also never clean it. When driving, there's something in between gassing and braking. You can coast to let the car drag and slow a little before turns, exits, or to merge into slower traffic. That birth control being 99% effective doesn't mean you'll get pregnant 1 out of 99 times doing the deed. It means that, on average, if 100 couples do the deed for 1 year, then one of them will get pregnant. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I live in the Midwest around a lot of farmers and country folk. A whole bunch of us went out for a friend's birthday the night before Easter. The bar was playing one of those Charlton Heston movies where he was portraying Jesus, and I made a comment to my boyfriend about how I found it funny that everyone in the movie was white, considering this story takes place in the Middle East supposedly some 2,000 years ago. One of the guys in our group whipped around like someone just told him a nuclear bomb went off, and was like, "What do you mean? Of course Jesus was white. Haven't you seen all the paintings in church?" The long and short of it, I had to explain and show him that different cultures portray Jesus in the skin tone of their choosing, when in reality, if he existed, he was probably pretty dark-complexioned dude. I'm pretty sure I ruined this guy's night. Browsing the threads of Twitter has revealed to the narrator all too many times that there are many, many people who cling to Jesus being white like it's the one thing keeping their lives together, and react aggressively to any claim otherwise, despite the fact that it doesn't change the contents or lessons of the good book one iota. They should probably think about why it makes them so angry. It doesn't matter. Woo boy, I'm a nutritionist and work in retail, so I have hundreds of these. It was a steep learning curve being exposed to the public that made me realize things I thought were glaringly obvious really aren't. So, a list of the ones that stick out to me right now. That oil is fat. I've honestly had customers say they take oil as a protein supplement or ask if oil has carbs. That fruit has both sugar and carbohydrates. That calories can only come from carbs, protein, or fat, and alcohol. Like all food is made up of those three things. That's it. That's the only options. That nutrients come from food, and that's the whole point of eating. Customers often think they can do crappy meal replacement shakes or 500-cal non-food diets for months at a time and wonder how they get deficient in basic nutrients like iron or magnesium. That fish oils come from fish. Yes, I'm serious, people ask me this all the time. That flour is made of ground-up grains. And my personal favorite, that Himalaya is not a country. My customer will say, "I need Himalayan pink salt." I say, "Sure, it's just in this bulk bin here." It says this is from Pakistan. Do you have one from Himalaya?" The Himalaya are mountain ranges that stretch across a few countries, including Pakistan, where the salt is mined. Oh, are you really sure? I stare into the camera like The Office. That the word scuba is actually an acronym. Also, laser and radar. That having snow in the winter doesn't mean global warming isn't real. That when you make a Fantastic Four movie, you should try to make it good. That just because you have your turning signal on, it doesn't mean just go ahead and cut somebody off. Finland fought hard in World War II, and on both sides, because Stalin wanted Finland. That pound cake is not just a name, but a recipe, traditionally a pound each of flour, sugar, butter, eggs, and a dash of vanilla and salt. I was having a conversation with a friend about what desserts could be made with just what's in the normal pantry, and I mentioned pound cake, and he asked for the ingredients in the recipe. I'd assumed everyone knew pound cake was a recipe, so I found this request somewhat odd. He had never heard of it being a recipe, started asking other people over the next few days, and no one I asked knew about it. Polyglottism. In my country, most people speak at least 3 languages – English, Malay, Mandarin, or other Malay dialects – on a daily basis. My family and I can speak 4 languages – English, Malay, Mandarin, and Hokkien – fluently. I'm also able to speak basic Cantonese, Korean, and Tagalog. So I'm confused when people treat my multilingualism as some sort of special intellectual power. I was born and raised in a multilingual society. There's nothing special about my linguistic ability. Frankenstein is the name of the doctor who made the monster, not the monster itself. Africa is not a country, it's a continent. But South Africa is a country. That data is the plural form of datum. Trebuchets are the superior siege machine. You'd be surprised at how many didn't actually know this. Why the sky is blue. This debate keeps popping up everywhere I seem to go, and without fail everyone agrees it's because it reflects the ocean. In fact, blue light is scattered in all directions by tiny molecules of air in the Earth's atmosphere. Blue is scattered more than the other colors because it travels as shorter, smaller waves. That's why we see a blue sky most of the time. How about one that isn't common knowledge but probably should be? If you're like me and put something on your computer to watch as you go to bed, knowing the shutdown timer command is great. Open the command prompt, or in Windows 10, simply type into the search bar shutdown-s-t 3600. The 3600 is how many seconds after you enter the command the computer will shut down. -3600 equals 1 hour. You can do whatever time you want. It saves electricity and keeps your bright monitor from waking you up later. That bees are female. The ones you see anyway. There are drone bees who impregnate the queen, but the worker bees are all female. The same with ants or any hive insect. The husband and I discussed this once and it completely blew his mind. I didn't realize he legit didn't know, so I let out a chuckle. And he thought I was making fun of his ignorance and got super angry. Now it's a joke between us, but I was seriously confused. And this isn't the same for all hive animals. Termites are not the same. They're a mix of male and female, but the queen secretes a hormone that suppresses reproduction amongst the workers. Thank you for subscribing to Bug Facts. 2 things. So yeah, the narrator also thought that all bees that weren't the queen were the male ones. And as creepy and alien as most insects are to us, termites just seem that bit weirder now. Because apparently they're one dead queen away from going into a mating frenzy. Or maybe that's not how it works. The more you know. That Britain isn't a separate country from England. When I moved to the US, I lost count of the number of people who couldn't understand that I was both English and British. What really messed with their heads was when I pointed out I was also European. Please explain this to the people who make Outlander. I'm so tired of the whole "the Scots are fighting the Brits" crap. People, please, the Scots are British too. New England isn't a state, it's the regroupment of Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut. Apparently I didn't know that 2 weeks ago. Evolution. I had no idea it would be considered controversial. Happened to mention it to a coworker like he asked about the book I was reading and it was on some biology crap, and among other things I said blah blah about how these evolved to do this, and the next thing I know he's flipping right the frick out on me like, "You can't seriously believe that nonsense." And then he bullied me the whole rest of the time I worked there and even recruited a couple of easily manipulated, dim-witted idiots who worked there to bully me too. You'd think he'd calm down after the first couple of hours, you know? At least by the next day, but nope. He stayed furious forever, over me mentioning stuff that's taught from like grade 4 or something onwards. And I didn't even suspect that a moment of chit-chat about ants or something, I forget what the book was about, could erupt into any sort of problem. It was really startling, like I opened a whole can of peanut brittle and snakes popped out. I just don't get it. Either you accept the scientific method allows us to figure things out and experts can inform the rest of us about their field's accumulated knowledge, or you don't. And if you don't accept it, then how can you trust airplanes or heart surgeons or prescriptions or gas appliances or anything else done using science? If you do, then how do you justify trusting, say, the heart surgeon, but not the paleontologist or geologist? I'd met religious folks before, of course, but as far as I knew, they justified discrepancies between scripture and facts, like God causing evolution and that passage being a metaphor, rather than deciding the discrepancies mean fact is not fact. The guy's intense horror at the very idea that someone might trust science was a whole other thing from how normal religious people think. I hope. Maybe more people than I know feel the way he does, but they're just smoother and keep it quiet. And there's something bad the incident's done to me now. Now I'm less likely to trust religious people. Like, I try to avoid telling them anything about me because I'm afraid of another freakout, and I don't know what all the things are that they might find triggering. That Northern Ireland is a country, that it's within the UK and people use sterling there. That Titanic absolutely happened and it isn't just a movie. When you drive up to a big box store like Walmart, Kroger, whatever, one side says home or something similar, and one says fresh or something similar. Home is the non-food stuff, normally starting with a pharmacy section. Fresh is the food size. My partner had no idea and had just been guessing at which side to go in for the past decade. He just assumed people knew which side because they'd been there before. When I visited the US and Florida when I was 13, I was asked by an American woman, "What's it like living in an igloo?" I'm from Canada. I couldn't respond because I was baffled. We live in ice castles, lady. Do your research. You get fat when you eat more calories than you burn over a long period of time. Everyone seems to think it's because of carbs or fats or your thyroid, or because Mercury is in retrograde or some other mystical, mysterious BS. Computers. I grew up around computers and watched my mum use ours at home often, and I picked up on how to use it, troubleshoot, etc. Apparently, having common knowledge of computers is a rare trait that a lot of people just don't have. It's also apparently not common knowledge anymore for people to be able to count change, read an analog clock, or know the difference between north, south, east, and west. Also, this one's probably not common knowledge, but it's something that I learned recently that blew my mind a bit. You ever wonder the best way to tell which side the gas tank is on without getting out of your vehicle? If you look at the gas tank meter, you'll see the picture of a gas tank, and there's usually a little triangle right next to it. That triangle points to whatever side the gas tank is on. That Christians are Jews who believe Christ was the Son of God, and Muslims are Jews who believe in Muhammad as a prophet. They all still worship the same God, the God of Abraham. Most people think it's 3 different gods. It's almost as if they never actually read their religious texts. People having their lives figured out. Took me a lot longer to realize that most, if not all adults are not sure what the frick they're doing. What gross, crazy shenanigans happen in the McDonald's play pit. I found a pair of rusty scissors in the ball pit when I was 6, gave them to a staff member and got a free ice cream. I know now that it was likely a bribe to keep me quiet. You know what? My experiences weren't bad at all. I found like 4 original Game Boy games in the ball pit once, games including Tetris and Donkey Kong. Some kid smeared his number 2 on the inside of the tube. Had to call in a cleaning company to take care of it. An old couple were with their grandchild. They sat down at one of the tables that had the tubes running over it. The kid went wee-wee in the tunnels above, and it dripped down all over the old people and their food. I swear to God, whenever I went to one of those tubular germ factories as a kid, there were always mysterious yellow-green puddles, or at least the faint smell of wee-wee and whatever crappy disinfectant the poor employee who had to squeeze himself into the thing had used. Never stopped me from going into them, though. A lady left her 2 young children in the play place 4 hours while she went to the thrift store shopping. Eventually, a nice old woman came in and told me they were there and didn't seem to have a guardian present. So, of course, I called the cops. When she finally returned, she admitted that she does it a few times a week. Another time, I was getting ready to lock up for the night and I noticed smoke coming from under the hood of the play place. I was quite surprised to find 4 older men smoking green herb and cigarettes, sliding and giggling. Some fricking kid climbed all the way to the top of the slide and took down his gosh darn pants and slid down the slide. The problem was he made brown the whole way down. There was a fricking trail of crap spanning the entire second half of the slide. We only found out because some other fricking kid slid down the slide and came out covered in chunky liquid chocolate and crying uncontrollably. Look, viewer, you knew when you clicked on this video that the story was going to be more than 50% children's bodily emissions, didn't you? Neither of us are surprised, although I will admit that the image of the kid leaving a snail trail all the way down has got me laughing out loud in public while I write the script of the video. Kids are awesome, in a really, really messed up way. Our play place was replaced with video games and a giant crawl-in Happy Meal box quite a few years back. It's all in a glass room. The place is disgusting. Children leave food in there, they spew, and even go to the bathroom. Also, quite a few employees have hooked up in the giant Happy Meal box. I feel that our bathrooms are much cleaner. I mean, I hope so. That's where I've been eating my meals. I will now tell the story of the best thing I ever saw in Playland. This was at Burger King, not McDonald's. In the South, these things are simply called Playland. A few years ago, me and my kids were eating at Burger King, and of course we had to eat in Playland because kids. Burger King had at this time installed talking garbage cans in there. It was probably intended as a way to get kids to throw their own trash away so employees wouldn't have to do it so much. Whoever designed those things knew nothing about children. When you put trash into the talking trash can, pushing your garbage in past that plastic spring-loaded flap which says "thank you" on it, the trash can would then say, "Thanks for the garbage," or something like that. You know, things a talking trash can would say. Any parent could tell you what would happen next. Children do in fact know that trash cans cannot actually speak. So each successive child, having been congratulated by the trash can, would do the obvious thing and put his head inside the trash to see who's in there. Then the spring-loaded "thank you" flap would swing shut and grab the children by the neck in the manner of a squirrel trap, and they couldn't get their heads back out, and there would be flailing and muffled screaming, and they'd have to be rescued by mommy. This happened over and over and over. Kids of a certain age would put their heads in a talking trash can, even if they just saw the last kid get garroted by it. It kinda makes them even more curious. Just one kid after another getting choked by this evil instrument of torture. Thanks for the trash! It was the best thing I've ever seen. Kids leave, new kids take their place, new victims for the magic trash can. I never got tired of it. Next time we went to Burger King, there weren't any more, but I hope someday they'll come back for another try. Thanks for the listen! I really want to see the face of the brilliant guy in corporate who thought of this when he's shown a video of kids getting their heads stuck in the trash can. 2 teens hid in the ball pits and just went at it. Unsanitary as heck, but I guess teens will do it anywhere. My aunt got stuck in that spiral slide once. And yes, my aunt. She was about 40 at the time. I'm not really sure why she decided to go down the slide, but she did, and she didn't fit. They had to shut the play place down and call someone to pull her out. I had this large kid get stuck in it, and when I was sent to pull him out, I got sued for reckless endangerment of a child and inappropriate contact with a child. I seriously wanted to punch the parents. The frickers got me fired and held up in court for 3 months. Kids literally take their Happy Meals in there and just forget. Heavier things are always at the bottom, like cheeseburgers, then there's a layer of chicken McNuggets and such. 50% of the ball pit is in fact edible, 25% balls, 25% kids number 2. Whether or not the doo-doo is more or less dense than the nuggets depends on their diet, I guess. I'm not an employee, but when I was a kid, I was climbing in and out of the play place. I was getting pretty tired, so I decided to take a little break inside one of the tubes. I noticed a whole bunch of flies and decided to follow them. Turns out there was a dead iguana that was just rotting away inside the tube. I was crawling over it the whole time without realizing it. A kid had the runs in one of those cars at the top. Well, he thought it'd be a good idea to take the slide down to tell his mum that he'd gone boom boom. I had to go up in there, clean out the car with a crap ton of rags and a bucket of sanitizer. Then I had to clean the trail of smears that went down the slide. I quit immediately after when I learned I wasn't supposed to be the one cleaning that stuff up. You know, this thread is making me feel better. One time, my son went doo-doo in the play area. When I realized it, I went and cleaned it up. Before I was done, someone told the staff about it. So I'm there cleaning it up and then I see a McDonald's employee. I said, "Don't worry about it, I got it all." And he said, "Wow, thanks, that's the first time that's happened." Feeling embarrassed, I said, "The first time a kid has went number 2 in the playground?" "Oh, heck no," he said. "That happens about once a week. This is the first time a parent has cleaned it up themselves." That was enough to make me change my mind on how much McDonald's employees deserve to get paid. Sheesh. As a former slave of the Golden Arches, thank you. And yes, you might be one of the first people I've heard of in history to do this. Have you ever taken pity on us teenage, pimply custodians of the playpen before? Sound off in the comments to let us know, and we'll testify for you at the gates of heaven. Never seen any crap at McDonald's, but as a parent I can confirm the play place is full of fricking turds. Raise your kids better, McParents. Not quite McDonald's, but I worked at an indoor playground where we had a big version of the play place complete with a ball pit and inflatables. A 7-year-old was running and going number 2 at the same time, leaving a long streak of half-solid excrement across the arena, which resulted in little mud tracks leading to every part of the facility. Another time we had our toilets back up due to a clog in the main line. When the plumber opened up the drain to check it out, a crap geyser proceeded to erupt about 3 feet in the air, flooding the bathroom with about 2 inches of standing sewage. Not to mention, this was the women's bathroom. When asked to clean it, both employees quit. Being manager, I was left to deal with the aftermath. I have countless stories involving every form of human excretion at this place. We even had a death occur on site, which I can't go into. After that, though, employees always rumored about the ghost which would cry at night if you stayed long enough and would move around toys. We had all of these incidents caught on camera, but I no longer work there for what should be obvious reasons. A kid threw up and proceeded to pick up fistfuls of chunks and throw them at other children, who then followed his initial example. Ugh. We closed the play place for like 2 weeks to have the whole thing heavy-duty cleaned and sterilized by a hired-out company. A woman got angry that her kids couldn't play. She yelled, "I'll show you, clean," ripped the hazard tape off the door, broke the lock on said door, and proceeded to put her finger down her throat and add to the mess. That was right before I quit. The last thing I heard, she was trying to sue our owner, stating that the chemicals in the play place, which she broke into, made her ill, so she was hospitalized. Not McDonald's, but I worked at a Discovery Zone kind of place in high school. Once a month on Sunday nights, we would host middle school dances. The older teens or whatever could show up and do whatever they wanted without the little kids around. There was always a pretty decent turnout. I saw the following things. People getting handies in the laser tag maze. People getting handies in the ball pits. Pretty much just people getting handies everywhere. For a while, a kid from the ghetto JH ran regular dice games that took place on one of the pool tables. I generally just let this happen. Unused rubbers in the quarter and token return in every single arcade game. A girl blew chunks down the slide leading to the ball pit. We figured she was drunk and she got arrested. A girl and a boy came out wearing each other's clothes after a game of laser tag. And unrelated, but my favorite, there was this slightly chubby, awkward, nerdy-looking kid there by himself, not really socializing. I think his parents made him come. I gave a group of girls a ton of tokens, free pizza coupons, free entrance passes, etc., just to go talk to him. By the end of the night, you could see him come out of his shell. He continued to come to the dances and was a social machine after that. I liked to think I changed that kid's life somehow. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. It started as a fairly average Monday morning. Began my shift as usual and watched over the kids. For the most part, there weren't too many incidents. A couple of kids got into a small fight, but we usually don't step in unless it's anything serious. Anyway, it was getting kind of late and I only had an hour left. 2 kids got into a pretty big argument with lots of hair pulling and pushing. I was feeling pretty tired that day, probably still hungover from the night before. Didn't really bother to do anything because it just looked like their parents noticed anyway. One of the kids was fairly older than the other one, and the mother of the younger kid was pretty angry that her kid was being bullied. The mother of the older kid was your typical lazy parent who doesn't give a crap about what their child gets up to and insisted that it just wasn't her problem. Now, the mother of the younger kid looked extremely angry before they'd even begun to talk. I could visibly see her face growing redder and redder as each second passed. She told the other mum that she should bother to raise her kid properly and said that her daughter should give her child an apology. The mother just shrugged it off and turned away. Apparently, the mother of the younger girl didn't like that because within seconds, she had grabbed her by the hair and slammed her face into one of the plastic slides. The rest of the kids simply watched in horror as the mother proceeds to push the other woman headfirst into the ball pit while desperately trying to kick her in the head. The last thing I saw, she jumped up and tried to elbow drop her pro wrestling style. Quickly got my manager to call the police. The mother was thrown into the police car, and I'm pretty sure they had to get an ambulance for the other woman. Needless to say, the play place was closed early that day. They didn't reopen it for almost a week. You know, I'm of 2 minds about this. On the one hand, these are both opposite ends of the spectrum in a lesson on how not to be parents. On the other hand, this would be something you told your friends about the second you went to school the next day. These crappy moms probably made a whole bunch of kids' days. Thanks, morons. I can recall one time our shake machine wasn't running well. The shakes would come out very slow. They took forever to fill the cup. It was like that for quite a while. When they finally brought someone in to take it apart, he discovered a cockroach in the shake tube. All the shakes we'd been serving were filtered through that roach. Some little kid went number 2 in the twisty slide, and it was in the middle so the kids at the top couldn't see it. So kids would slide unknowingly into a makeshift crap and slide and get crap on their backs, faces, back of their heads, hands. It was horrendously disgusting. Worst day of my life. I used to work at McDonald's with a bunch of friends in my neighborhood. Every time someone hurled in the play place, we always chose the same friend to clean it up. We used to make fun of him all the time for that. One time, a fat kid, not just kind of chubby but morbidly obese 200 to 300 pound 12-year-old, decided he wanted to go in. I saw him go in. About 2 to 5 minutes later, I hear crying coming from the tubes. Apparently, the kid got stuck. Hard times at the play place. We got a call from Central Dispatch. They asked me to check on a tripped alarm at the local Mickey D's. It wasn't a big play place, only about a 2 on the Ronald scale. But I had a feeling something significant was just waiting to happen. The big surprise, though, was that nothing happened until I looked into the double exterior slide. A small girl, only about 5 or 7 years old, clutching a greasy takeout bag. It looked heavy, plump, full of the unknown. I took the girl inside to the kids section and asked her a couple of questions. She was homeless, got forced to rob the place by her street friends. She thought it'd be an easy job. When I looked into the bag to see what the loot was, I was taken aback. McNuggets. Patrolling the McDonald's almost makes me wish for a nuclear winter. My sister had to clean number 1 that ran from the top of the slide to the bottom. She started at the top like an idiot and lost her footing. McCraphole's employee here. No play place at my location, but I'm going to vent about mostly irrelevant things so you all have some insight about working in fast food. Lunch rush, 8-hour shift, hungover as frick working the register. People ordering Happy Meals and not specifying which Happy Meal. Just frickin' saying, a Happy Meal. Me? Which Happy Meal would you like? The parent bends down to their child to ask. The child mumbles, hides head in shame. Meanwhile, the line is growing and the customers are getting more disgruntled. A bead of sweat begins to form on my brow as the mother tells her child to tell me which meal. An eternity elapses before mere infant utters its first incomprehensible words. I'm sorry, could you repeat that? Once again, the child mutters something in Gaelic. I'm sorry, didn't quite get that. Small baby babbles, the parent won't help them out. Time to take a guess. I order a large sweet tea, 3 McDoubles, and a large fries. She's watching her weight and she asks for no salt on the fries and sees no irony in this at all. We have to make a whole new batch of fries for this one request. She stops talking. I say, "Will that be all for you?" She says yes, but what she meant to say was no, because she continues to order more food almost as soon as I press the Pay Now button on the register. She orders more lard for herself. "Alright, will that be for here or to go?" She looks to the child, gazes towards the dining room, looks up for something, anything, she just wants a sign, I guess. For go. My brain has now melted. Blood is now trickling out of my ear. There's no "for go" button on my register, so I make a guess once again. I know there's no way I've gotten this order correct. I accept defeat. Alright, that'll be $23.67. The woman's face drops. The room is absolutely silent except for the racing beat of my heart. "I thought sweet teas were $1. They used to be $1 all over the country." Her rage is building as I stutter, "Well, they used to be, but now they're $1.19. That extra 19 cents is blood money in this business." Nostrils flare, an angry sigh. She wants me to change the price even though I'm clearly a minimum wage employee, not the CEO of McDonald's. "You people are robbing us blind." The woman has mistaken me for a commissioned salesperson instead of a cashier. She now proceeds to go through the price of every item she's ordered, only to find that yes, indeed, our register is capable of simple addition. She hands me a 20, 3 ones, and a bucket of change that somehow only amounts to 65 cents. "I'm sorry, I still need 2 more cents. She rolls her eyes but forks it over. "Alright, your order number will be 267. The order has taken all but maybe 2-3 minutes tops, but by now the once orderly line has turned into an impatient mob. They feel hunger, not for McChickens or those precious McNuggets, but for blood. I, on the other hand, thirst for liberation. My lips manage to bend awkwardly into a smile as I say, "I can help whoever's next." A large man walks over and O Fortuna begins playing. "Are you guys still serving breakfast?" It's 2 p.m., sir." "Oh, alright then. I'll just have a shamrock shake." It is December. Like the author said, this is not a play pit story, but I've run out of things to say about kids going boom boom in the ball pit, and felt inclined to include the story of the daily misery that those who work at this place feel every day. Solidarity, Comrade McD's employee. Not an employee and not from McDonald's, but one time road tripping up Vancouver Island with my brother and stepmom, we stopped for lunch at a Burger King in that town with the giant hockey stick and puck in front of the arena. So my brother and I, about 12 and 10 respectively, scarfed down our meals and started exploring the play area. Now, this wasn't your average play place, it was huge, and they had these weird, child-sized, hard stuffed animals attached to the floor with Velcro. I don't know who came up with them or how they were meant to be played with, but they resembled a harder, lighter punching bag in texture. Back to the story though. Our stepmom sat below, finishing her food, while she glanced upwards every now and again to make sure we were okay. My brother and I soon parted ways in the massive labyrinthian structure. Sometime later, a random kid and I squeezed past each other while crossing paths in one of the tubes. As soon as we were clear, he glared back at me and growled, "You touch me again and I'll slit your frickin' throat." Now, this kid couldn't have been any older than me, so you understand my shock at hearing this uttered by a child no older than 10. As if he even had a weapon. He was gone before I could process what he said, and I didn't retort. Oh well, back to playing. I guess some kids are just crazy. Sometime later, my brother and I met at the top of the spiral slide. Being that he got there before me, he went down first. As I'm sliding down the spiral, I hear an argument unfolding below. As I emerge from the bottom of the play place, the scene became clear. Psycho Kid was all up in my brother's face, screaming unintelligible obscenities. I guess the little crap took his time getting off the slide and my brother slid right into him. The kid is getting more and more aggressive, screaming louder and getting physical, shoving my brother's chest like little jerks always do when they want to intimidate. My brother, who I'll point out is a head taller than this frickin' delinquent, is keeping his cool and trying to tell the crap to F off. The kid's dad is nearby and get this, the hick greaseball mumbers, You tell him, Jimmy, in between mouthfuls of a Whopper. A couple of things went through my head before I acted. The kid's unfortunate excuse for a father couldn't care less if the world ended tomorrow. My brother can't as well beat this younger jerk without some kind of repercussion. My approaching stepmom is a good 5 to 10 seconds away on the other side of the play area, and I need to reassert my dominance over this hillbilly spawn whose best experience with violence probably comes from WCW or the crappy example his dad set to him. The kid didn't see me coming. I ripped a nearby giant duck from its Velcro binding and brandished it by the tail, charging towards the violent little brat. I don't even think he turned around at all. The first blow hit him square in the back, with all my weight behind it. He tumbled onto the floor in front of my brother, gasping for air. I guess I knocked the wind out of him. But I wasn't finished. "Slit my fricking throat, will you?" I shouted with every swing, each strike harder than the last. He was crying for his daddy by the time my stepmom dragged us away. She was about to end the trip early before we explained the situation. In the end, she decided to not punish me, gave a heavy sigh, and chalked it up to another case of small-town madness. I don't work at McDonald's, but one time I was playing in the ball pit and came across a turd. Ridiculous. Today I learned never to go to the McDonald's play place, or at least check everywhere I take a step or sit. Ladies, what do you wish self-proclaimed nice guys would understand? Romantic comedies are nothing like real life, and using the tactics shown in them will only creep the object of your affections out, not win them over. They should be treated just like fantasy movies because that's pretty much what they are. Just a fantasy you enjoy seeing acted out for various reasons. It's like how it's commonly accepted that adult flicks aren't real. Well, consider romantic comedies emotional adult movies and treat them accordingly, please. Absolutely agreed. Do not show up under my window at 2 a.m. Do not creep until you figure out which hotel I'm staying at on my vacation and send miniature beanie babies that reminded you of me to the hotel addressed to me. Do not awkwardly try to steal my clothing to put on your pillow and sleep with because it smells like me. Do not leap between me and anyone I'm having a conversation with to ensure that they're not going to incapacitate me and commit the unspeakable act in the midst of a huge group of people. And do not find out where I work and consistently leave love letters under my windshield for me to find when I get off my shift. None of these things are acceptable or appreciated. I'm not quoting movie sequences, folks. I'm speaking from experience. And what these guys told me they considered romantic gestures. Although the showing up under the window and the love letter on the windshield ones are pretty 80s rom-com. I think proclaiming yourself a nice guy is the problem in the first place. People who are genuinely considerate and decent don't have to declare themselves honest and nice. People know them to be so by their behavior. Being nice, specifically as a means to impress women, as a means to an end, is not genuinely being nice. It's kind of like the Game of Thrones quote, "Any man who proclaims, 'I am the king,' is no true king." Hearing guys describe themselves as nice immediately makes you immature. It's the equivalent of saying, "I'm not like other girls." Sure. Maybe you are or aren't, but proclaiming it does nothing for proving it. Let people judge you by your deeds, folks, and not just the fancy ones we put on to impress people. Doing a good or nice thing and then shouting, "Did anyone just see the really nice thing I just did?" is not a thing that will turn anyone on, guy, girl, or whatever. Big pick-me energy. Being nice is the bare minimum. You should be nice to everyone, not just the pretty girls, and you should do it because it's the right thing to do, not because you think it'll get you laid. You have to bring more to the table than just being nice. If women see you being nice to pretty women and standoffish to other women, especially if the other women are the pretty one's friends, they tend to see through that sort of thing. Things you don't think girls notice, but that we totally do notice. 1. You've been asking out or hitting on everyone you know as though at random. 2. Except for the girls who are near or below your attractiveness level. And 3. You have major depression or anxiety and are using dating to fix your personal problems. You don't get special credit for showing the bare minimum of human decency. I know this guy who likes to make a number about how he's a decent guy and a good guy and how women used to respect good men. He's not a particularly good man. He's a man who hasn't committed any crimes. He told me a story about how a girl passed out next to him and how she was so lucky to pass out next to such a good guy who didn't commit the unspeakable act. He then likes to tell this heroic story to people and expects praises about how incredibly well he did and what an exceptionally lucky lady she truly was indeed. He goes on about how he goes to school, knows how to shower, and doesn't drink or use substances numerous times a week. These aren't qualities that make someone a good person or a good man. These are qualities that make you a normal person. If the bar you're setting yourself is that you can function like a normally developed adult, should behave, like making your own money, taking care of your hygiene, following the normal social rules like not being rude to others and obeying the law, and that women should be more impressed or grateful for that, you need to either date someone who isn't able to accomplish those things themselves and finds them impressive, or then understand that the other person is doing the exact same thing. I really don't understand where this kind of attitude comes from. Maybe a product of parents who believe their child is a miracle and should be told so from every single thing they don't mess up. Actual nice guys don't have to tell a woman they are the nice guy. My husband is a kind man, a great man. He never once told me he was a good guy or a nice guy, he showed me. So, if you have to tell someone you're nice or good, chances are you probably aren't. My grandpa always had a saying, "Guys with big Johnsons don't gotta brag about it." I like to think it applies to this situation. That just because you're decent to me, it doesn't mean I owe you anything in return. As a guy, I would hate that so much. Some dude does something nice for you, then throws a tantrum when you don't go south of the border on him? Jesus, you didn't ask him to do whatever he did. If you're only acting nice to get her in bed with you, that doesn't actually make you a nice person. 1. Sometimes, while grateful for the nice thing you did, it's too much. For example, at a place I once worked, some guy asked my supervisor if he could have a little extra help on a project he was working on, and could I, the temp at the time, go and help him. When I got to him, he actually used it as a chance to hand me a rose. So, yeah, it was meant to be sweet, but it was completely unprofessional, especially as I was trying to get a permanent job. I also then had to reject him and he turned hostile towards me. 2, if you're only nice to me, especially as a way to get with me, then no, you're not nice. If I see you being nice to other people, then I'm much more likely to see you as a potential suitor. I lost my best friend over some nice guy BS like this. My significant other and I had gotten into a fight and he felt the need to console her and let her vent to him. About a week went by and he began asking if she had liked to meet and talk over drinks. At this point, the fighting was over and we were back to normal. She showed me a message saying I didn't deserve her and that he could treat her better. She deserved someone nicer. Ended up getting into a fist fight with him on my front lawn and we haven't spoken in 3 years. She's still with me and we're getting married next month. To add to the points people have already made, one of the reasons why a woman isn't comfortable coming out and saying, "I don't want to date you because I'm not attracted to you," and has to use other softer reasons like, "I'm busy, I'm just out with my girls," etc., is because of a genuine fear that things could go south during the conversation and a guy who seemed nice at first could get violent or start stalking her. Not that that extreme scenario would happen with every guy she rejects, but it only needs to happen once for it to affect her life. One thing most women experience, frequently, this isn't rare at all, is an exchange like this, especially online. "Hey, beautiful." "Oh, hi. You want to go out sometime?" "Sorry, I have a boyfriend now." "You think you're better than me, you stupid B-word? You're not that hot anyway. I'm not going to do a 4 like you when I'm scoring 8s and 9s practically in my sleep. Have fun being a C-word." We've learned how to soften the blow, and we're afraid of being too direct because that violent outburst would be 3,000 times worse in person than online. These conversations usually start off reasonably nice, and you never know who the violent guy is going to be. They blend in with the other guys, Agent in the Matrix style, so we have to be cautious. If you're not a man who's going to give a woman a negative reaction when you're rejected, I understand being a bit offended or miffed when you just don't get a straight answer, but the thing is, we don't know that when we're saying no, and we're so afraid of the alternative angry, bitter, mean, or even the potential of the violent response. The situation can go so bad so fast, and we've seen or experienced it going so badly before. We're not trying to mess around or play games with you or keep you on the back burner. We're just afraid that if we do straight up say no, we're going to be called fat, ugly, stupid, a whore. We could well be degraded, barked at, or worse, actually attacked. We don't know that you aren't going to turn into a scary jerk in that moment. It can be very weird, scary moments for us. We aren't trying to be cruel or dismissive, but we don't know how else we're supposed to respond without risking our mental or physical health. Guys, please understand that we do in fact like nice people. The fact that you're a nice guy, or so you think, is not the reason someone isn't attracted to you. This is important to note. You get to see if a guy is really nice with how they deal with rejection of any sort. People aren't turning you away because you're nice, it's because you can't necessarily trust that superficial niceness. The 27 back-to-back messages at midnight are why they're turning you away. Desperation is the opposite of sexy, and it very often smells like excessive solicitousness. Reasonably attractive girls are as turned off by a stage 4 clinger as reasonably attractive guys are. You see generosity when you send her a gift that you can't really afford, and she sees pressure play and starts worrying about the strings attached. You see friendly interest when you ask her all about her life and take notes. She sees prying and starts worrying that she can't leave her phone unlocked around you. You see TLC when you want to spend lots of time with her doing all the things she likes. She sees a social vampire of a guy who doesn't have anything worthwhile of his own going on and starts worrying that you expect her to be rich and Amy. You see old-fashioned chivalry when you freak out about her opening her own door or offering to split the check or dealing with a creep without male support. She sees a guy who's so insecure he can't stand the thought of a woman autonomously dealing with a real adult life and starts worrying about the embarrassing scene you're going to cause when an ex-boyfriend drunk dials her. If I'm not attracted to you, you will only ever be a friend. I should note that this applies to nice girls too. 1. If you're interested, tell her how you feel. No, giving hints doesn't frickin' count as not everyone picks up on those. And it doesn't matter how obvious you think it is, it's all up to her. 2. If you don't tell her how you feel, then she doesn't know how you feel. If there's a friend zone, it's your own damn fault. It's like refusing to go set up a set of stairs and being upset that you're not on the next floor. 3. Not every guy she's dating is a jerk. You only think that because you're jealous. 4. Or maybe he is a jerk to you because you've had a crap attitude toward him and acted all possessive of her. 5. And the reason she's always dating other guys is that at least they asked her out. 6. You just might not be her type. 7. Or she's just not attracted to you. There are people you don't find attractive in life. 8. Don't say you know you're her type. You know nothing. It's up to her. 9. Movies and books lied to you. Pining isn't romantic. 10. If you hold it against her that she's not that into you, you're not a good friend. 11. In fact, unless you want to be her friend for the sake of having her as a friend, you're not her friend. 12. If you offer to do things, you don't expect any repayment unless previously agreed on. 13. If you think she owes you bedroom favors, you are wrong. 14. Leonard Lake thought like this. 15. If you want the deed for your money or services, find a working girl or be a sugar daddy. And 16, as someone else pointed out, too many nice guys go into a scary fit when rejected. We all hear stories about this. See Leonard Lake. Don't do this. And finally, if you expect something in return for being nice, you're not a nice person. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. The friend zone is made up. Girls lean on it a lot when they don't want to tell a guy that they're unattractive. If a girl says that she doesn't see you in that way, what she means is that she values your friendship, but that she doesn't want to do the deed with you. End of story. It's not like you got yourself into the situation by being nice or trying to be her friend. If you hadn't been nice, she still wouldn't want to do it. To reiterate, she's not attracted to you. If you want to be friends, be friends. If you're here to do the deed, don't pretend otherwise. Moping and crying about the friend zone isn't winning you any extra points either. Unreciprocated love sucks. We get it. Move on. Yeah, it also kills me when nice guys act like women should just date them anyway because women could never understand how much it hurts to be into someone who isn't into you. Like, the frick? Have a crush love that doesn't get returned is a pretty basic human experience. Men don't own that. Stop protecting us from doing the deed with other people. We're human too, and independent agents quite capable of deciding when we'd like to do the deed and get the deed done to us. If you see us slipping off with a bad boy, it's because we're down to do it, not because our pretty little heads have been manipulated or misled. And if you frame us as children in need of your white knighting, you've no business pursuing a romantic relationship with us anyway, you pervs. Newsflash, doing the deed is awesome. Get on board or get the frick out. Oh my god, yes. I hate it when they say crap like, most guys look at your body, but I'll only love your mind. Or, most guys just want to do the deed, but I'd give you a candlelight dinner and foot massage. Or, girls, stop showing your body. You have to be a lady to marry a gentleman. Most girls take pride in how their body looks and enjoy doing the deed. Even if you're looking for a serious relationship and not a casual hookup, you're still looking for someone who's compatible both emotionally and in the bedroom. Saying stuff like that just sends the message that you subscribe to outdated gender expectations and that a relationship with you would be unexciting and no fun in the bedroom. Women are not vending machines that you can drop kindness coins into until bedroom favors fall out. Womanity is not withholding getting laid from you and waiting for you to say and do the exact right combination of things to unlock the bedroom. Your desperation is repulsive. Women want to do the deed too, but they don't want to risk pregnancy, herpes, or your clingy drama for a crappy bedroom time. She has interests to protect too, and you're mostly antithetical to them. Stop being that. All these are good points, and the narrator wishes he could pass them back to his much younger self when he was just a D-bag nice guy freshman. Thank you for submitting. But what I'm really here to admire is the use of the term womanity. Surprised I haven't seen it before. Being nice is usually the minimum requirement for a partner. For anyone, man or woman, straight or not, who wants a good, fulfilling relationship. Don't think you're clearing a high bar just by not being a total butthole. What else have you got to bring to the table? Work on that. Don't delude yourself into thinking that women don't like to go out with nice guys. Almost every woman who's in a good, loving relationship would describe her partner as someone who is good, kind, and a decent person. So get that out of your head. Only messed up people you wouldn't want to be with anyway are going out with jerks or alphas or whatever else you want to call them. Crushes are often fleeting, so if you're befriending a woman or man to feel them out for dating, make your move quickly. There's a good chance she has a little crush on you too in the beginning, but if you don't make a move and ask her out, she'll just assume you want to be friends and she'll move on to her next crush. 4. Don't get caught up with women who want to vent about their jerk boyfriends. More often than not, this just becomes toxic triangles where she has one guy for doing the deed and romance and one guy for companionship and nobody is happy. Also, see my above tip on crazy people you wouldn't want to be with anyway. Doing the deed is not a right, it's a privilege, and most of all, it's a choice. You don't get to decide for me. You don't have a right to me. I don't owe you a chance any more than you owe some annoying girl you aren't attracted to a chance. You aren't nice, you're making me uncomfortable when you don't back off, and me calling you on your crappy behavior doesn't make me the one at fault. If you were really my friend, you wouldn't make our relationship about your own desire for bedroom favors and intimacy from me. I didn't friend zone you, you crush zoned me, and you're a really crappy friend if you never even want to be friends in the first place. If you pretend to be my friend, then turn on me when I don't want to F you, you're the one who was manipulating me, not the other way round. Not a female, quoting from an unknown source. Okay, you're nice. That's what everyone else should be. The bare minimum of being a decent person. What else? Are you interesting, funny, clever, charming, talented? Because the guy over there is also nice. He also goes to the gym, volunteers, has a band with his buddies, and is applying to law school. He also doesn't put me on a pedestal for having a hoo-ha. He challenges me to improve and be a better person. He doesn't give me everything I want, he supports me as I work towards my goals on my own. So what the hell else are you offering? Being nice doesn't get you any points. Your score is 0. Loser. If you're a nice guy and she doesn't want to go out with you, it doesn't mean she wants an awful jerk for a boyfriend, she just doesn't want you for a boyfriend. I can't count how many times nice guys have lamented they can't get a date because they're too nice, and girls only want guys that are jerks. They usually follow this up with comments about how they should start being jerks so they'd have better luck. I wish guys would just understand that I'm legitimately just being a kind person and that I'm actually a lesbian who's not interested in men. That if you're not attracting the kind of people you're attracted to, then maybe you are the one who has to change. We're human, and we get randy and possess an innate desire to screw and get screwed as well. Stop protecting us from ourselves. We're independent agents and not children, and if you frame us as children in need of protection, you have no business pursuing a romantic entanglement with us. If you've ever been ditched in favor of a bad boy, it's because we want to do the deed without judgment and shame, which is a typical, healthy desire for men and women above the age of 12 or so. Nice is the absolute bare minimum you have to be. Self-depreciation isn't cute. If you say things like, "Oh, I'm such a loser," or "No girl is ever going to date me," even in a jokey way, it will not elicit any positive feelings from the person you said it to. It's like a woman saying, "Oh, I'm so fat." Similarly, if you view yourself as a lonely, forever virgin, or the guy who girls just love to friend-zone, then it's going to come across pretty obviously to women, and that isn't attractive. Literally nowhere is it written in the stars that anyone has to like you, let alone want to date you. Nobody is contractually obligated to think positive things about you. You have to be a likable person to get people to like you. Sometimes it takes more work for certain people, but if you don't do the work, people don't like you. I don't not like you because you're nice. I love nice guys. But nice guys are usually the ones who don't have to constantly proclaim how nice they are. Wait a minute. You mean I can't fake every aspect of my personality and then be upset when she won't sleep with me? Shocking. Nice guys tend to put women up on a pedestal. Don't do that. I don't want to be worshipped and have my butt kissed, and I don't want to have to try and live up to the idealized version you have of me in your mind. I just want to be treated like a regular human being. If you have to say that you meet the bare minimum, you probably don't, and even meeting the bare minimum doesn't entitle you to doing the deed. It reminds me a little bit of an ad I saw for a house when I was looking to rent. The features it listed included windows and a full kitchen, which are indeed things I expect a house to have. Went to look at the house and indeed meets some of the basic requirements for human habitation, was the absolute best you could say for it. You're not nice and nobody owes you bedroom favors. Women don't like jerks, they like non-socially inept, non-self-congratulating, self-assured, attractive guys. That's it. If you don't fall into at least one of those categories, that has everything to do with your personal shortcomings and nothing to do with the woman you fancy being a B-word. In short, get over yourselves. No one owes you anything, especially in a world where you can get all the bedroom stuff you want for a fee. If you need to do the deed, either get a working girl or get a better personality. If I'm talking to you and seem interested in what you have to say, I probably am. But that in no way means that I'm necessarily interested in dating you or doing the deed with you, because those aren't mutually exclusive items. Talking to you like a person in no way means I'm leading you on, because talking does not equal flirting. Along similar lines, if you act like you want to be a friend, then that's what I'm going to take you as. Don't get angry or cry friend zone when you're treated as my friend and my friend only, because how else was I supposed to interpret your behavior? Expecting anything else is either lying to yourself or to me, neither of which are particularly endearing. Be straightforward with what you want, or don't be surprised when you don't get your secret desired result. Finally, it's a really crappy feeling to find out that someone you thought was a friend was only there to try and get in your pants. You feel devalued and stupid because you've been lied to and betrayed by someone you trust. Don't be that guy, especially if it's to someone you supposedly care about. When did you get busted in the act? You know, aside from being caught doing the deed in the back of my car by a police officer, I don't really have one that's truly horrifying, but I know the rest of the internet does, so let's hear it. When I was 6, I had to go to the bathroom pretty bad, and my father used to tinkle in the backyard all the time, so I ran out into the back as quickly as possible, and for some reason, don't ask why, I completely removed my clothing and proceeded to go wee-wees on our oak tree. And out of nowhere, I also went number 2 on myself while standing up. My parents and 3 of their friends, who had been enjoying their drinks, saw the whole thing. The problem for me wasn't that I got busted, it's that I got busted by the wrong person. In freshman year in college, I was in the dorms and I had a pretty goofy relationship with my roommate at the time. I heard his key enter the door, so I decided to do something funny. So I stood up in the center of our room and shoved my hand into my pants and began to furiously mime tickling my pickle. I closed my eyes, headbanged, and waved my other hand wildly in the air. I heard the door swing open and I just went for it, shaking my head and both my arms in an exaggerated fashion. When I opened my eyes to see his expression, I realized I was staring into the eyes of my roommate's father, whom I hadn't met yet. He was helping my roommate carry some groceries in from the car. He set down the groceries as quickly as he could and then just left. There was another trip, but he just left those at the door and didn't come inside. He'd flushed red instantly. In short, my freshman college roommate's dad walked in on my imitation of whacking the mule wildly in the center of the room. It was the first time we'd met. At the Mall of America, walking around the upper balcony when the floor started shaking a bit, I muttered out loud, "Holy crap, was that an earthquake?" I turned around and there was a morbidly obese woman walking right past me. Oh my god, I hope she didn't hear me. It still might have been an earthquake and a coincidence. Still, I can't imagine that either of you are feeling great for the next few hours of your lives. I too have done this kind of crap, and you have my utmost sympathy. Post-whoopee with an undressed boyfriend laying in my dorm bed, I heard a knock at the door. For whatever reason, I assume it's my roommate, who was pretty chill about stuff like that, so I wrap myself in a towel and stand behind my dresser, about to head into the bathroom, and say, "Come in." It was both of my RAs coming in to do room inspection. It wasn't my proudest moment. I can't imagine what they thought about me and why I thought it was okay to say, "Come in," right then. I was at the Metrodome for a Twins game. I developed a severe case of itchy butt, and it soon became clear that a booster wipe was imperative. Left the game and stood in the long line for the stalls. When it was finally my turn, the large handicapped stall with the double-wide door was the one available. When I got in, I had some difficulty with the broken locking mechanism, but soon I got it to seemingly latch. I then went to town on my itchy butt. Facing the toilet so it would seem like I was taking a leak, I wiped once and again and a third time until it came back white. I threw the final tissue in the toilet, pulled up my pants, zipped and flushed, finally turning around to leave the stall, only to see 20 or more very uncomfortable-looking men doing their best to avoid any eye contact with me. The stall door had silently swung open behind me, and my shame was laid bare for all the world to see. I wanted to make a beeline from the bathroom, but in light of what I'd just been doing, and the fact that everyone knew it, that just wasn't an option. So, head down, I darted to the sink, washed my hands, and got the heck out of there as quickly as possible. I've never been so simultaneously embarrassed and amused at the same time. Despite my mortification, it was just too funny for me not to share. I bring down the house every time I tell this story. Walking home after a closing shift at Wendy's, my bowels suddenly went into watery-feeling red alert mode. Still 3 blocks away from home, 4 blocks away from any public restrooms, I glanced around frantically and spotted a house across the street with tall boxwood bushes surrounding it. Streetlights didn't reach it. Target acquired. I sprinted over, yanked down my pants, and squatted behind the nearest bush. Then with a hearty, "Hi-yo, I blasted my employee meal all over the wall, ground, bush, pants and undies, and shoes. With a heartfelt, "Frick," I gingerly tried to scramble out of my soiled clothing, only to trip helplessly into the crap-soaked bush as my understandably unremoved and equally crap-covered shoes snagged in my pants legs. I laid in the now crushed bush, cursing quietly for a moment as I didn't want to disturb the residents. Then I managed to kick off my shoes and remove the pants and undies without getting much further soiled. The undies were ruined, but the pants, with a little work, could pass for okay in the dark until I got home. Crouching behind that bush, bitterly enjoying the cool breeze on my butt and junk, I scrubbed the soiled parts of the pants and the grass, used my t-shirt to clean myself. I always took off the employee shirt after work, thank God. I did all of this as best as I could, shoved the undies and t-shirt as far into the bush as I could hide them, then stood up to inspect myself, ready to make a quick dash for home. The sound of 3 startled screeches rang out into the neighborhood as I suddenly popped up facing the house, directly in front of what I guess was the bedroom window, where both the husband and wife, in bedclothes, were staring in disbelief not 6 inches from my nose. I convulsively jerked back, again falling into the fricking bush, sliding off it to the other side on my back, scratching the living heck out of myself. Boxwoods are tough, by the way. I flopped like a fish in agony for a few moments, or what seemed like an eternity, then finally managed to stagger back to my feet and bound groggily away. Shoes forgotten, one arm clawing at my back, trying to feel if I'd actually impaled myself on that bush or not. It wasn't my proudest moment. In short, forced to take a horrific number 2 under a bedroom window, thoroughly humiliated by a bush, observed for an unknown amount of time by the occupants of said house. When I first started working in New York City, I lived on Long Island and had a nearly 2-hour door-to-door commute via the Long Island Railroad. One night on a later train, I managed to grab a great seat only to have them pull the train out of service and ask that we switch to a new train. For those that don't know, this is bullcrap because now all the people that were late and forced to stand have the advantage of exiting first and getting to the new train for a seat. I got off and I knew that I had no shot at a seat as I was behind hundreds of people going up the escalator. I noticed that the down escalator was totally empty and decided to just go for it. Ran my butt off to get to the top, took my final leap and came up short. I hit the deck flat on my face. Humiliated, I got back up and ran to the train. I got myself a seat too. In short, don't go up the down escalator unless you're willing to pay the price. This is a wonderful depiction of how most of us would do in any given action movie. So thank you once again, people of the internet, for reminding us that we're not Jason Bourne. We're Terry, the overweight office accountant, and if we try to climb down via that scaffolding, we will in fact shatter our pelvis. Sophomore year of college, I was on the rowing team. The weather wasn't yet warm enough to be on the water, so we were inside on the ergs, which is what we call the rowing machines. We had some hard workout, I can't quite remember what, but it was an interval workout with 3 minutes on and 2 minutes off for 25 minutes or something along those lines. The point is that it was intense, more intense than normal. The intenseness of the workout was making me have to break wind, but the constant use of my leg, butt, and abdominal muscles prevented me from letting them out. So after 25 minutes, we had a 5-minute break before the next 25-minute piece, and I go over to the water fountain to drink. I had my music blasting and I was exhausted, so I didn't really notice my surroundings at all. I just took a quick glance around before bending down to drink. While I was drinking, all of the gas that had built up came to a head and was about ready to burst. Still bent over and drinking, I let it rip. I swear it was the loudest, largest volume emission I've ever expelled in my entire life, and I still have yet to top it. The force of my butt cheeks vibrating was violent enough to the point that it made my butt sore afterwards. It was a full second. Seriously, say 1001, and that's how long it went, of absolute maximum flatulent thrust. It felt like I'd expelled my entire lung capacity out of my rear end. Feeling rather pleased with myself, I stood up and turned to go back to the ergs. To my horror, standing directly behind me, seriously not more than a foot from my butt, was a girl waiting to drink. She didn't look up, she didn't move in any way, her facial expression was completely frozen with her mouth wide open, eyes staring at where my butt had been. I quickly shuffled away and looked behind me after walking about 50 feet, and she still hadn't moved. I spent the rest of the next week bursting into random fits of giggles. It became a bit of a team joke. To this day, I'll sometimes think about it and burst out laughing. I also giggle at the fact that she may have seen who I was before standing behind me, and every time she sees me on campus, all she can think about is that one scarring moment of her life. In short, ripped an enormous guff when I was drinking at the water fountain, not knowing anyone was behind me. The girl froze in a look of terror. Maybe she's still standing there paralyzed to this day. I went to college about 4 hours from home. I was coming home from spring break one year. The parents lived in a rural area, and about the last 45 minutes of the trip, there was no place to stop and take a bio break. I didn't have to go at the last opportunity, so I drove right on by. I was about 20 minutes from home, and I felt the turd drop into the chamber. This wasn't a "ruh-roh, Raggy" moment right away. I felt I could hold it together. It would only be about 20 more minutes. All was well, and as I approached home, I think the psychological fact of "ah, yes, I made it" set in, and the last mile of my trip was sheer panic. But alas, this is not a tale of me crapping my pants. This is a tale of not expecting anyone to be home. I made it to the front door, and as I was clinching the Bombay doors tightly, I started singing a little tune to take my mind off the torpedo that was armed and ready to launch. Gonna crap my pants, gonna crap my pants, gonna crap in my pants. Over and over again. Walked into the kitchen and saw one of my mum's best friends who was there for a visit, unbeknownst to me. Mum was at work. Horrified, I immediately changed my tune and played it off like I was just lazily singing random tunes. Shush 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 do-dum-dum-do-do. So I poker-faced it and went right for the John. But I think she probably figured it out. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. In 2nd grade, I was asked to deliver something to the main office. I was so excited that I got chosen that I forgot the door to the classroom was right at the end of the hall I was about to go down. The whole class watched me skip all the way down the hall. The sound of laughter was echoing down the hall, and the crippling embarrassment still haunts me nearly 20 years later. Listening to music in my car, awesome song comes on. For a second, I think I'm a rock star and bob my head up and down with that "I'm so hardcore" face. I do that all the time, I can't help it. I'm at a light and I look over, and my ex is next to me with his new girlfriend. They both start laughing and waving, and while they were still watching, I accidentally spit my own gum down my shirt. I cannot look him in the face when I run into him. I live in a small town and I see him all the time. I was about 13 and watching a Marilyn Monroe movie. She was doing this hot striptease, so I thought, why not? And started whacking the old hog. Now, I thought I was alone in an upstairs bedroom, so I finished and then noticed there was a guy in the window smiling at me. I forgot they were painting the house. Later, my sister said to me, "So, you really like Marilyn Monroe, huh?" Oh God! I think it's pretty crazy that this guy, A, stayed watching a minor do his stuff until the end of the deed, and that B, he immediately decided he should share the fact that he was staring at self-fulfilling members of the household. Not sure that anything he'd have to say would hold up in court. My lord, I'd managed to forget this for 19 years, and now here we are. I was about 6, and my family had just gotten a cat. He licked himself all over, all the time, because that's just what cats do. Not understanding the purpose, I figured there had to be something awesome about licking a cat. So I was just sitting there, looking at the cat, who was just licking the frick away as usual. My sister was across the room but otherwise occupied. Curiosity getting the better of me, I lean over and lick my cat. For the record, he tasted like a cat. So as I sat contemplating the cattiness, I hear from across the room, "Did you just lick the cat?" Yes. Sister was disappointed. I used to sketch customers at work when they were taking forever to order and just staring at the menu. Often I'd accentuate undesirable features because I freaking hate most of our customers. I stopped doing this when a lady came up to the counter and leaned over it asking, "What are you drawing?" It got awkward. No one noticed before her though. I used to work at Starbucks. We had this massive pair of tongs used for pulling paninis out of the oven. One closing shift, I had the brilliant idea of mimicking Pac-Man. I then proceeded to clap said tongs in front of my face while chanting "Waka Waka Waka" and walking out onto what I thought was a completely empty sales floor. I was greeted by all the members of my new boyfriend's family. I froze, and they were staring blankly at me. Awesome first impression. Oh God, here it goes. 2-part story. Starts with a whole day trip with my dad and a couple of his friends. After eating a couple of burgers my dad made, I got a massive case of the runs. I went into the woods to hide in a couple of trees. No biggie, I thought, after evacuating an ungodly amount of number 2. Later that day on the ride home, it happened again. Holy butt juice. My insides were churning, I'm trying to concentrate, it's 15 minutes more home. We finally make it, and as I take that final leap out of the car, I accidentally brown myself in front of all of my dad's friends. They, being the outstanding gentlemen they were, decided to go and get a couple of beers while I sort my crap-covered self out. So here I am, taking a shower to clean myself after the horrible incident, and I start to sing in the shower. I'm singing the Rocky theme at full power, tarun tun tarun tun. Finish my shower and say, frick it, no one's home, so I walk out undressed while doing the Rocky theme and air punching like there's no tomorrow. Walk across the living room where I feel a presence. It's my dad and all his friends staring at me What the frick faces all around. Not my proudest moment. In short, I crapped myself, then got caught air punching to the Rocky theme, undressed. When I was an imaginative 13-year-old, I was always coming up with inventive ways to prepare for kissing a girl. I tried kissing magazine pictures, which didn't taste nice, and the mirror, which tasted even worse. Also a balloon. Seriously, don't bother. But I still felt woefully unprepared. One day, I was at a department store and I saw a shapely half mannequin that was sequestered away from the general public. I thought I'd give it a shot. Had to be better than a balloon, right? Not so much. I guess mannequins aren't cleaned regularly, because when I pecked it on the lips, the funky smell and oily film hit me like a brick. That brought me to my senses and I turned to leave. I had to find a water source to clean whatever filth I'd just touched my mouth to. That's when I heard the bzzzt bzzzt sound of servo motors and I looked up at the security camera zooming in on me. My grandmother used to run estate sales for people who didn't know what to price things at, or for people who were still grieving and couldn't be bothered. I always came to help her out at estate sales because it was fun to just hang around with random people's old stuff. So one time when I was about 17, I'd kind of had some green herb, and I was hanging out in some dead dude's house when I found a milk pump for new mothers. I'm a guy, by the way. And I thought, what the heck? And I started to pump my chest for man milk. Not 10 seconds later, shirt over the back of my neck and hooked up to this pump, my grandmother walks in, manages to maintain the very blank expression on her face, does a 180-degree turn, walks out and closes the door after her. Not unlike Grandpa Simpson in the Burlesque House episode. And not a word of it was ever spoken again. In college, I lived with 2 roommates in second year. One weekend, they both went away back to their hometowns, so I thought it was the perfect opportunity to have my then-girlfriend over for some fun bedroom times without volume restraint. Saturday morning, we got at it again right after getting up, and after I excused myself, walking completely undressed to go get us some water. I walked out of my room and to the end of the bedroom hallway, and when I opened the door, one of my roommates was just standing there, about to light a cigarette. Inside, which was strictly verboten amongst us. We both just froze. We were staring at each other, me completely undressed and him with a cigarette hanging from his mouth, a lit match burning in his hand right next to the cigarette. I wheeled around after what seemed like forever and walked back into the bedroom where I fell over laughing. As someone who's been caught in this position and worse by flatmates, it seems like one of those things just neither of you ever mention again. And for whatever he could complain about, at least you weren't the one breaking the rules like he was. More something said, I was walking down the hallway at my school. I proceeded to walk up the stairs with my arms full of books. For some reason, I thought my body could handle the simple task of stairs, considering I'd been on them my entire life. I was wrong, of course, and my left foot caught on the staircase. I collapsed to the ground, face planting into a stair. My books exploded and scattered everywhere. I just looked up and screamed, "Con!" Then I saw an elderly professor staring down at me. He made a remark about noise in the hallway and smirked. The wrinkly old jerk didn't even help me. I was in the park a few weeks ago and I noticed a mini tornado/whirlwind nearby that was about 10 feet wide, whipping garbage and leaves around in a perfect circle. As it moved closer, I held my ground and soon I was in the exact eye of the storm with flying debris circling around me. Accordingly, I clenched my fists and raised them to around chest level, then looked to the sky with eyes squinting through the dust and wind and let out a mighty extended "Roar!" to fully emphasize my powerful wizarding weather summoning skills. It was exhilarating. At least 5 people probably saw me, but I was unconcerned as they were mere mortals. I walked away like a boss as if it was nothing more than a morning stretch. A few years ago, I was walking through Walmart with my dad. We were just going to get something real quick. I was wearing a low-cut shirt, which is relevant. My dad and I were talking about funny walks people do, and I started in on this long stride, fast-paced walk. Well, my chest popped out of my shirt. I got them back inside real quick and looked around. At first, I didn't see anyone notice and then looked ahead and there was this guy walking towards us. I'm absolutely sure he saw, although he sported a pretty good poker face. When I was a teenager and my parents were away for the weekend, I decided that it would of course be the opportunity for an extravaganza of beating my meat like the world's worst butcher. I got hold of some adult magazines, set myself up nicely in the living room with the normal accoutrement, and after having a first great whack of things, I was ready for another go. Cue my furious and almost violent tugging, legs akimbo. Some really uninhibited crap. And then, looking slightly to the right of the TV, I see movement in the door. After quickly putting myself away and muting the various moans coming from the TV, I sprang to my feet and cautiously made my way to the door, just in time to glimpse the fleeing backs of what appeared to be young children exiting our driveway. I believe they may have been selling chocolates or some other school fundraising effort. Since then, I've been sure to keep my activities within reasonable limits and out of public view. My office has really tinted windows, and one time I opened the blinds and saw a big, fat lady pressed up against the glass, picking food out of her teeth in the window's reflection. It was really gross, and she never saw me. I just closed the blinds again. Wedding attendees. Did you ever see one get cancelled mid-ceremony? In 6th grade, my entire class went to our teacher's wedding. My teacher was the bride and about 3/4 of the way down the aisle when the groom decided he just couldn't do it. He walked off to the side, and at first my teacher and her father didn't notice and kept walking, smiling radiantly. There was about a minute of really solid confusion, last-minute cold feet, bathroom emergency, before everyone realized what was going on. My teacher was whisked out of the church and an announcement was made that there wasn't going to be a wedding. This happened the 2nd or 3rd week of June. She didn't come back for the last week of school. Ugly situation. Not called off, just relocated. The bride wanted everything to be lit by candlelight as it was much more romantic. Well, of course, something, a wall hanging or tapestry of some sort, caught fire, set off the fire alarm, and everyone had to evacuate the church. The ceremony was continued and finished in the parking lot with a couple of fire trucks in the background. I worked at a bar when I was at university. 2 guys came in dressed to the nines. I asked what they were doing that day, and they told me the wedding they were going to was cancelled. The maid of honor had been sleeping with the groom. One of the other bridesmaids had known about it for some time, but decided the best time to tell her was the morning of the wedding. A co-worker of the groom got super drunk, stood up and announced she had been boinking the groom for the past 6 months. This was right before the bride walked down the aisle. The bride's cousin had a sudden and unexpected fatal heart attack. Took the entire family a month to recover. Bride and groom had a small ceremony afterwards. God, what a drama queen. Just had to take the spotlight away from their happy day, didn't they? Some people. And yes, the narrator is almost certainly going to hell for that one, among many other reasons. Not a wedding I was attending, but my friend had told me about it. The ceremony was never called off, but in fact the bride and groom had decided not to get married, but just didn't tell their guests that. So my friend was telling me how this couple were having problems before the wedding. He would say going to their house was just awkward and that they'd always complain about each other to him. On the day of the wedding, everything from the outside looked normal. Bride and groom seemed like they were genuinely happy, but they'd decided to not actually get married. Like they never went and got a marriage certificate, so it was basically a fake wedding. They had a ceremony where they exchanged I do's, but it wasn't actually real. Guests bought gifts and everything for the couple, and they just cashed in and went their separate ways afterwards. My friend said he found out months after the wedding that the whole thing was just a hoax, and how they weren't giving any of the gifts back. I know it wasn't really called off mid-ceremony so much as the bride and groom secretly deciding to call it off, but I thought the story was wild enough to share. My father's first wedding. This took place in Colombia in the mid-1960s. He and his best friend were marrying sisters. They also happened to be my father's first cousins, which is an important factor. Anywho, this wedding became an impromptu family reunion since it was basically the same family on both sides. One of my father's relatives was a young man in the Colombian military at the time, and he was trying to entertain the family's children the morning of the wedding, while everyone was getting dressed and preparing. His chosen entertainment appeared to be playing around with deactivated hand grenades, apparently trying to drive a nail through them to mount them onto a board of wood. I don't know, that's just the story consensus. Turns out it wasn't properly deactivated and was a perfectly functioning grenade, and it performed its purpose admirably. instantly killing the young man and a lot of the family's collected youngest generation instantly. The wedding wasn't cancelled though, they just had a small, quiet ceremony a few days later. Jesus. When I was in the Navy, scams for BAH, or Basic Allowance for Housing, were pretty rampant. I'm sure they still are to a certain extent. Basically, the base pay you receive in the military isn't that much. If you're married or you have kids, however, you get BAH, which is a tax-free chunk of change the government gives you every month so you can house your dependents. How much you receive is based off the zip code where your dependents physically reside. So if I'm stationed in Norfolk, but my wife and kids are living in Boulder, Colorado, then we get the BAH for Boulder, Colorado, and I live on the ship or in the barracks. It's fairly common, and the sailors who do this are referred to as geographical bachelors. Okay, so with all the setup out of the way, I was shipmates with a guy who was a complete sleaze. He was also bilking the Navy out of BAH for many years. He was turned in multiple times, but he kept getting away with it because, at the end of the day, it's very difficult to prove that you're only married for the BAH. Nobody says that it has to be a healthy marriage. Nobody says it has to be a marriage based on love. He had been married to an older woman, like in her 80s, living in San Francisco for the past few years. San Francisco has some of the highest BAH rates, so he split it down the middle with her and they each took home a decent chunk of change. In exchange, she played along, let him list her home as his home, and for all legal matters, considered him her husband. Well, she died and he was bummed and a little angry that he was about to lose a big chunk of cash. So he went out and began seeking his next paper bride in a high BAH zip code. He settled on a working girl from New York City who was from some Eastern European country. To legitimize all of this, he had a wedding and invited numerous people from work to witness it. I went there because there was a promise of free food and he told us we didn't have to get him gifts. Easy day. About 5 minutes into the whole thing, she backs out. Apparently, she didn't fully understand what he was proposing. I think it was mainly a language barrier issue. She thought he just wanted someone to pretend to be his wife, like hang on his arm at a party and say she was Mrs. Crapbag. She didn't realize that he actually intended to legally marry her. Quite a bit of this was hashed out in front of all of us because they retreated to a private area where, as I understand it, he pleaded with her to go through with it and promised to remit her about $1,000 every month as long as she played ball. After an hour of begging and pleading, she left. We ate the food, had a good laugh, and went about our lives. The guy also found himself a proper paper wife and began bilking BAH again before getting booted from the Navy for something completely unrelated. I was told the bride never showed up because someone was having cold feet. The worst part was I was a young kid at the time and couldn't understand why someone would break off their engagement to a person they loved just because their feet were cold. It took me years to realize it was a saying. Why doesn't she just put some socks on and get on with it? My mum's friend was dating a man with a drinking problem. When he asked her to marry him, she said she would marry him if he never had another drink again. He agreed to give up the sauce for her. The night before the wedding, his friends threw him a bachelor party with alcohol and he drank. When he walked down the aisle, he was staggering a bit and she noticed. "Do you take this man to be your lawful wedded husband?" "No, I don't." They paused the wedding and went back with the priest for a counseling session. The priest came out and sent all the guests home. You know what? Good on her for sticking to her word. If you give them an inch, they'll take a mile. Went to a cousin's wedding somewhere in Arkansas, maybe Little Rock. The wedding was put on pause when the priest started coughing uncontrollably, turned red, and fell into the altar. He lived, but there was a mild panic at the wedding when it was discovered that he had had viral meningitis, and literally the entire church full of people, let's call it 300 to be fair, had to go to the hospital and get tested and prophylactic treatments. Sounds like that wedding was the event of the century. The viral event. Actually, there's probably multiple stories like this during the pandemic alone. My cousin was getting married, and about 15 to 30 minutes before the wedding started, she was told that the man she was going to marry was arrested and had been on Washington's Most Wanted because of stuff he did either with a 14-year-old or was planning to do with a 14-year-old. He was like in his mid-20s, he ended up in prison for whatever it was, and right after she told everyone, the back porch broke right under her and her friends. It wasn't much of a drop, like 6 inches, but that's when she burst out in full-blown tears. It was a very awkward day, and honestly, if I wasn't there to witness it, I wouldn't believe it either. My wedding was close to being called off since my husband's grandfather was close to dying. Everyone told us to go through with the wedding anyway, so we did. My husband's grandfather ended up dying close to the moment we said, "I do," and my father-in-law got the call from the hospital shortly after we left the church. They told all of his family, but not us about it. So we had a lame wedding with everyone grieving but saying, "It's nothing," when we asked why no one was dancing. We got condolences the morning after and congratulations on his funeral. I could still cry when I think about all that stuff. It was 4 months ago. I should start off by saying I'm black, meaning a wedding will never start on time, and showing up on time, you're probably early. After 30 to 45 minutes of waiting, the old ladies from her church and my aunties started talking. Found out this was the second time they've tried to get married. The first time they tried to get married, he got into a bar fight the night before. We continued waiting for about 1.5 hours total, and finally they told everyone to go to the reception space because they're about to lose the church. I don't think anything of it. Whatever, there's food, let's go. During the reception, she does it all. The first dance, with my uncle, the dance with her dad, all the traditional wedding reception things. If it's not clear, this is all without her actual husband. Well, no one knows what to do at this point. They can't really give speeches because the groom isn't there, and it just seems awkward to celebrate something that, for the second time, didn't happen. Well, the bride decided to do a toast all on her own. She gets on the mic and tells everyone about how maybe she's just not meant to be married, how she's tried to get married to this guy, and it just isn't happening. Then she goes, "You know where this N-word is? Do y'all know where? Where this mother fricker is? He's in frickin' jail because of his dumb groomsman letting him drive home from the fricking bachelor party, and he got a DUI. So yeah, he's in fricking jail and we've been trying to get him out. There was no third time and no Prince Charming for her." You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Not called off, just interrupted. I was watching my friend's wife getting married. All was going well. Just as they were doing their photos, after being declared husband and wife, I leant against the wall to try and get a good photo, and I leaned on the light switches for the entire hall. All the lights went out, everyone was looking around, and thankfully no one else knew it was me, so in the confusion I tried to switch them back on. And they didn't come back on. Now their wedding photo album has some nicely lit photos and some that are slightly more edgy and dark. I've been filming weddings part-time for 7 years and I've only seen something like this 3 times. None of these were straight up called off though. One of the groomsmen accidentally dropped the wedding ring and it rolled down the elevator shaft. Ceremony was postponed for a little over an hour. Funny thing is, maintenance found the ring, and apparently the groomsman made up some bogus story to feed the bride. She had no idea what really happened. There was another one where the bridesmaid passed out due to heat stroke, and a third where a guest accidentally stepped on the couple's little dog, broke its spine, and had to be sent to the vet. The dog was like family, so the couple was MIA for almost 4 hours dealing with it. Must have been a real small dog. And that person must have been running or something. Me and my guys were asking ourselves, how the hell do you accidentally step on a dog? The wedding I was at still went ahead. The bride and groom were standing at the altar with the wooden rail in front. One of the groomsmen starts swaying, and over he goes, face planting, hitting the rail on the way down. He ended up with a broken nose and an ambulance was called and he was taken to hospital. The wedding still went on and everyone made the best of it, and we were happy for the bride and groom. Cut to the reception following, a little boy was running around like a mad thing, as kids do, and ran through a glass door. The ambulance was called, the child was taken to the hospital. He was okay. The marriage didn't last, though. You'd think after such a roller coaster of a wedding that their marriage would pretty much survive anything. Warts in the downstairs area. I'm not even joking. I was one of the groomsmen for my friend's wedding, and his family was super religious. I mean like Jonestown levels of religious. So he hadn't been intimate with his bride yet. So we were all waiting by the altar for the music to start and we were silently chatting. Now, one of the other groomsmen, he had dated her for about a year before they, the current groom and bride-to-be, got together. And he let loose the following statement to another groomsman. "Yeah, she's really sweet and all, but she gave me something fierce." And both the one he told that to and I asked him to elaborate a bit. And I'm sure she ended up giving him warts down there. We had maybe a good 3 minutes before the music started, and we all started telling the groom as fast as we could because he had a right to know if she hadn't told him. He had this look to him like he didn't want to believe it, but he slowly walked down the center aisle to go ask his bride if all of this was true. Now, when he gets up, his parents follow him because they think he's getting cold feet. The rest I can only describe from my place at the front of the church. For the next 45 minutes, we heard talking, then shouting, then crying on repeat. Then the dad came out and told everyone that the ceremony was going to be postponed. It was a small ceremony, so we were all just scratching our heads and we left. We all then got a call 2 hours or so later that the wedding was off indefinitely. Apparently, the groom's parents didn't want him marrying someone who wasn't a virgin, let alone with a transmissible disease. We gave him some space for a few days, and after a while he filled us in on some of the details. Most of that wasn't important, but the part that really punched me in the feelings was when he told us about how the bride had to tell him and his parents in her damn wedding gown that she got the thing from something that took place against her will. The groom didn't call off the wedding, the parents did. I still think they're absolutely warty pricks to this day. To my knowledge, though, the former couple still talks to each other, so there's that. My good lord. Well, to further add to the narrator is going to hell pile of evidence, fundamentalist religious people just kinda suck. If the guy was gonna marry her anyway, literally warts and all, standing in the way is just crappy and evil. Get bent, family of the groom. We had just finished the ceremony and everyone was heading into the building to start dinner. I found my seat near the bride and started to chat with her friends. I saw the bride sit down at the table next to me and say, "I think I'm going to have a seizure." And she did. Fortunately, myself and a few other people had medical training and she turned out perfectly fine. After the EMS left, she stayed and finished the night by dancing and having fun. She actually had a history of seizures and had neglected to tell anyone or take her medicine this week. My best friend's wedding got called off. I was the master of ceremonies. His brother was his best man. So I was in a very unique way able to experience this beautiful event. I arrived about 2 hours before the ceremony was to start to chat to the caterer and check the microphone and speakers. As I was chatting to the DJ and just generally checking things out, I noticed every once in a while a waiter would walk by the bar with a tray of wine, beer, and shooters. I didn't think anything of it though. As time got closer to the ceremony at the church, people had arrived and everyone was having snacks and drinks outside the reception venue. Both the church and reception were on a vineyard, so they were right next to each other. The bride was delayed for a long time, something I couldn't understand since she was getting ready in the guest house right there on the property. In any event, we finally got the go-ahead that the bride was on the way to the church. They conveyed her on a golf cart, so we started getting everyone seated and ready for the show. I was standing at the entrance of the church to close the door after the bride entered, so I got to see everything transpire in all its glory. The bride climbed off the cart, and as she was walking towards the stairs with her father, she tripped and face-planted right there on the steps of the church. As this is in an agricultural setting, you can imagine that there's a lot of dirt everywhere, and accordingly, her dress was filthy. At this stage, I simply thought she fell over by accident and I ran over to help her get up. She dusted herself off, said she was fine, and continued in her usual fashion to enter the church. It's then that my suspicions started peaking. I noticed she was wobbling from side to side as she walked, but thought maybe she got hurt in the fall? As she started walking down the aisle, however, she was stopping to greet people in the aisles, making jokes, pulling faces, giving people thumbs up. It immediately hit me. She was hammered. By the time she got to the groom, he just stood there with his jaw open. He could immediately tell what was happening. She was standing there next to him in the church right in front of everyone, swaying from side to side and slurring. It was painful and cringe-inducing to witness. The best part is, she insisted the wedding proceed and that everything was hunky-dory. The more the groom wanted to suspend proceedings for a bit, she insisted they proceed. Then she exploded at him in the church in front of everyone, shouting and accusing him of ruining her wedding day, and then she stormed out of the church crying, and wouldn't you know it, she bumped into a bench in the aisle and went flying to the ground again. Wedding dresses are not made for running, and they're especially not made for drunken running. People helped her up and escorted her outside. The groom also left, and everyone just kind of sat there in silence. Since it was rather hot that day, we told everyone to go to the reception hall and have a drink while the situation was being dealt with. The bride had been drinking the entire day, and those shooters and drinks I saw being carried from the bar were for her and her friends in the guest house. I inquired at the bar how much the bill was prior to people arriving, and was shocked to see that between her and 2 of her friends, they'd drunk 3 bottles of wine, 6 beers, 6 ciders, and a crap load of shooters ranging from tequila to Jägermeister. In any event, the bridezilla is now crying and throwing tantrums at the guest house, loud enough for everyone to hear at the reception. Apparently, she continued to drink some of the leftovers from the previous round of drinks. The groom came out to apologize to everyone and to say that the wedding wouldn't be going ahead, but that everyone must please eat and drink and have some fun since everything had already been paid and catered for. I made the announcement and I joined the groom and his family, who had flown in specially for the wedding, for a drink and to come to grips with what just happened. Many people, especially from the bride's side, just went home. Meanwhile, bridezilla was crying and drinking away in the guest house with her bridesmaids. After about an hour or so, with many people having left, she stormed out of the guest house and screamed at the groom for ruining her wedding again, except this time she's even drunker. She storms off with her friends, and eventually we see them climb in a car and off they go. We finished our food and had some drinks and called it a night. I drive home with the groom and his folks, only to discover when we got to the complex where he and bridezilla were staying that she was sitting outside at the bar, right next to the complex, still in her wedding dress, with makeup smeared everywhere and drinking beers with her friends. The groom phoned her father, who then promptly came to pick her up and take her home. And that's the last I ever saw of bridezilla. They tried to make it work by going to counseling, and things just kind of fizzled out. Mainly because she was always drunk. They'd lived together for 2 years or so prior to the wedding, and while she did drink a lot, I never noticed it was that bad. Meanwhile, my friend informed me it had actually been a bit of a problem, but he didn't think it would get that bad. Well, it did. The wedding photographer and videographer was a friend of ours and was recording pretty much everything, so there's still a copy of this out somewhere. It reminds me I should probably email him and request a copy. In short, bride was absolutely crap-faced, fell at the church, fought with the groom at the altar, and then stormed off crying and screaming, and then continued drinking. When did a bro stop a party by trashing the place? Partying at an old fraternity house in college, and in the basement there was a lone PVC water pipe that stretched from floor to ceiling. This room also happened to be the location of the heaviest beer pong table known to man. Late in the night, after copious beers had been consumed, some wise guy decided that the beer pong table needed to be relocated. He proceeds to push the adamantium table up against the wall with some force, effectively shattering the PVC pipe. This is in the middle of winter, so ice-cold water starts spraying in a 6-foot radius out of the pipe, dousing nearly everyone in the room. Girls are crying about their hair and clothes, and the guys are yelling at each other about finding the shutoff valve, which took about 5 drunk minutes to locate. Meanwhile, I'm standing bone dry on the opposite side of the room, drinking a natural light, don't judge me, it was college, and watching an impromptu wet t-shirt contest. It was a good night. I saw a guy snort a whole Xanax and then throw a pool stick through a flat-screen TV. I don't know if that counts. Oh, don't worry, it does. Well, the Xanax didn't work, I guess. A friend of mine threw a party at his house a few years back. The house was split up into apartments, the first floor being one apartment and the second floor being another. Both floors had a deck out back, one right above the other. I was out in the backyard smoking a cig and talking to someone. I look over to see a few people drinking immediately behind the first floor deck. I happen to look up at the second floor deck to see someone walk out. He proceeds to then whip out his equipment and wee-wee off the back of the deck onto the group of people below. I was at a house party where the token hated roommate immediately got smashed and was stumbling around. He goes into the bathroom for about 30 minutes and then comes out giggling like a madman. He loudly declared that he left an upper decker in his own bathroom. Boy, were his roomies mad, and he thought it was the funniest thing on earth. He didn't find it so funny the next morning when they all but forced him to clean it up the moment he was awake. My God, my money definitely wasn't on someone's party foul being against their own living place. Also, I absolutely hate that upper decker is a common enough thing to become a recognized term. If you don't know what it means, feel free to Google, but for goodness sake, don't use image search. I know a guy that wiped his butt with a nice white face towel in my friend's washroom because he was too lazy to look for TP in the drawers beneath the sink. Also been to several parties where people got mashed and just tore the fricking house up, stealing and breaking stuff for the hell of it. That, to me, is the ultimate party foul. If someone is kind and gracious enough to offer you a roof to get drunk under, snacks, seating, and company, you better damn well leave the place in a relatively good condition. I was at a party in an apartment complex. I stepped out to the backyard for a smoke when I had a powerful urge to go number one. I was already hammered at this point and didn't give an F. I only had one shoe on, for instance, and I found a nice remote corner in which to relieve myself. Now I'm done. I suddenly hear the door to the backyard smash open and hear, "What the frick are you doing?" I zip up and turn around to find the super. Now, this super was already a legend for being a jerk, but that night he was getting ready to hit the town. And being the middle-aged Romanian he is, he had a 70s tuxedo-style shirt on with the buttons down to his chest. He had his hair slicked back and was sporting a huge gold chain, Miami Vice style. I freeze. Think. Just think. I stammer, "No English." "What did you say?" No English. Me no English." I'm Asian, and I'm saying this in my most broken Chinese accent imitation, helped on by untold shots of Jameson. "Where are you from?" "China," says I. "No, you frick. What apartment?" Now my English breaks down utterly, and I'm still just gesturing and pointing and saying stuff like, "My friend, his place. Up there." After 5 minutes of this, he glares at me and kicks my butt out of the apartment complex, which is fine except I'm wearing one shoe, don't have my keys, wallet, or phone. I see the super lock the front door and the backyard door. I have no way to contact my friends at this point, so I walk across to the neighborhood bar. The bartender kinda recognizes me. I explain my situation and he just shakes his head and gives me a pint of beer. He lets me use my phone to call my friends, but they're already too hammered to pick up. So I spend the night standing across the street from the apartment building, hiding in the shadows of a tree so that the super doesn't spot me, and waiting for anyone to enter the building so I can sneak in behind him. Later on, my friend tells me the super went around asking everyone if they knew who the whizzing Chinaman was. In short, booze turned me into a one-shoed illegal immigrant. A friend of mine was going wee-wee off the back deck of a cabin into the woods when a girl was stumbling back from said woods. I was standing about 100 feet away and I saw a glorious yellow arc strike this girl on the face and shoulders. She just walked right back to the bonfire like nothing had happened. She may have assumed it was rain because she was really hammered. I told her what happened shortly after so she could clean off that smell. In grad school, a few friends moved into a house together in their second year. The house was a death trap waiting to happen, but that's another story. They threw a party a few weeks after getting their keys, and for some unknown reason, a group of 10 to 12 freshmen had caught wind of the party and just showed up to get hammered. I arrived late to the party with some friends and immediately noticed two things. A, it is a complete sausage fest. All of the freshmen that arrived are male, and B, the faint but very distinct smell of number 2 invaded my nostrils as soon as I opened the door. Not dog do or cat scat, human turd. I guess that's the curse of having a very sensitive nose. I seek out one of the hosts, Will, and he gathers his roommates to make sure no one has clogged a toilet or upper-decked them. All of the bathrooms are clear, yet the smell remains and it's growing stronger. My friend Alice, one of the very few women, figures out that the smell is coming from one of the freshers in the living room that's drunk and dancing with a huge load of crap sloshing around in his undies. Not just a little, a huge saggy bulge that's clearly visible through the kid's khaki slacks. The smell in that room was overwhelming, but somehow none of the freshmen seemed to notice or care. We all just stared at him slack-jawed for a minute before Alice walks up to him and tells him that he may have had an accident. He flips out and bolts out the door, leaving little splotches of brown every time his foot hits the floor. It had run down his pants leg and was just beginning to drip off the cuff when we caught it. I left, they clean up, and kicked out all of the rest of the freshmen. The urinals in my fraternity specifically say flush up, because if you flush down, they flood. And if you flush down and then decide to kick the handle back up to rectify your mistake, there's a biblical torrent spraying in all directions. Many parties have been fouled by this arrangement. A friend of mine hooked up with a guy and then told him she loved him, at which point he avoided her at all costs. The next weekend, she showed up at a party in his dorm, crawled into his roommate's bed, and cried and vomited for 3 hours. Getting her home was a blast. Was at a party once with a friend who had to go number 2. However, the girl that had lived there was occupying the sole bathroom and refused to hurry up. My friend proceeded to the kitchen, opened the refrigerator, and left a fecal present in the vegetable crisper. You know, the narrator swears that he's been trying to spread out the stories involving bodily emissions like this. However, there seem to be a great deal of them. So please bear with me and understand that I'm cutting out the many gagging noises while I edit this. As some of you know, if you pop the top off a beer bottle with the bottom of yours, all of the beverage comes out. So, is not the correct assumption that you have to drink it all. This one girl goes up to my friend with the right idea and pops the top off of his beer bottle. But I guess she was a little too inebriated and just shatters the entire bottle in my friend's hands. My friend, who is now bleeding, looks up and says, "Oh, my hand's bleeding. Someone get me another beer." My friend did a heroic job of finding a trash can to chuck up in last New Year's. Unfortunately, it was a mesh trash can. A friend was getting angry with the guy who was throwing the party, so when everything calmed down and most people were gone or asleep, he got the butter. He microwaved the butter, then poured the melted butter into a bowl. Then he crapped in the butter carton. Then he poured in the melted butter and let it set in the fridge. Then he left. Maybe the butter didn't look right after, but I don't know because we left. And yes, he got the idea from urban legend. There was this guy on my swim team in college. Super nice guy, but terrible with women. He used to be really shy about changing in front of the rest of the guys in the locker room and would always change under a towel while the majority of the rest of us wouldn't bother. Then one day, the towel drops and we all see that he has a huge member. At first, we were all flabbergasted that this quiet, semi-awkward, prototypical nice guy was so well endowed. No one could keep it to themselves, and pretty soon all of the girls on the team knew about his big secret. At the next big swim team party, after a night of drunken teasing and congratulations, I think he felt emboldened, so in an attempt to distract the other team's opening shot at Beirut, or beer pong, he whips out his equipment and starts spinning it around helicopter style. His spinning member accidentally knocks over all 6 of his team's cups and they instantly lost. I was having some friends over for dinner and one of them began to eat his salad with his entree fork. The rest of the party was absolutely horrified. I nearly dropped my monocle. I was at a party in high school at my loaded friend's house. She had a hot tub which a few of us noticed was being seriously underutilized. My friend's widely despised redneck girlfriend got in first, and after I got a fresh beer, I stripped down to my boxers and made my way across the enormous back deck to the flush-set hot tub. As I stepped in, my foot slipped on the smooth fiberglass seat and to the side, right between the redneck girl's legs. I actually felt my big toe penetrate her as I fell into the water. I managed to keep my beer level and above water. As soon as I got my head back above water, she screamed, "My cooter!" I couldn't stop laughing for a very long time, and I still yell that sometimes when I see that friend. I think I redeemed my drunken clumsiness by A, saving my fresh beer, and B, by eliciting such a ridiculous reaction. In short, I slipped into a hot tub, fell in said tub, kicked my friend's girlfriend in the hoo-ha, who screamed, "My cooter!" managed to hold on to my full beer. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Watched a girl blow chunks mid-beer pong throw all over the table and then scream, "Chuck and rally!" We all cheered. She was one of the last ones up. At a bar in Liverpool in the UK, I was talking to my girlfriend at the foot of some stairs. Suddenly, a guy fell forward between the stairs right down between us, rolled onto his feet and walked away without missing a fricking beat. The best part was he was wearing a fur coat, sunglasses and a hat, carrying a drink and had a cigarette in his mouth. As he walked away, his drink was unspilt, and his cigarette remained firmly in his mouth. His hat and glasses were similarly undisturbed. Must have been some kind of party ninja pimp. beat a bunch of jerk dudes at beer pong with a hot girl as my partner, proceeded to lift her up with her straddling my waist and gyrated, quite suggestively, in triumph over the table. I was quite drunk, so I dropped her and the cups of beer on the tabletop went flying. My friend, when hammered, has a teensy bit of a throwing up problem. He was angry and paranoid one night and started using his geyserous discharges as a projectile to ward off people chasing him from behind. The same night, I was helping him relieve himself of his own chunks in the carpeted hallway of my dorm. A young gentleman shook his head as he passed by, saying, "That's just sick," and continued on to relieve his bladder in the trash can opposite of us. I like my school. I got this. This happened to me. This is a true story. I was having a small party at my apartment, about 20 or so people. Everyone's having a good time. Beer pong, Halo, Peter Tosh. Throughout the night, I got pretty flirty with one of the ladies and took her into my room. Son, I was drilling it. The thing is, though, unlike many Americans, I haven't had the snippy operation on my eggplant, and my outer skin tore. Something called the frenulum of prepuce is actually what tore, to be more specific. There was blood everywhere. I ran into the living room, undressed as the day I was born, holding my bloody rooster and screaming for everyone to call 911 because I broke my Johnson. A few of my friends and the girl stayed with me until the ambulance arrived, good friends, and the rest left. The girl was so embarrassed and crying. I remember holding my ruptured eggplant, putting pressure on it, trying to comfort her and tell her it wasn't her fault. Crazy fricking night. I'm a frickin' legend these days. My roommate called my mum and told her I was in the ER, so she showed up concerned. Laughing, the nurse who cleaned the wound was gorgeous and just kept repeating, "I'm so sorry." She later added me on Facebook because apparently I'm a charming mother fricker on Norco. The doctor stitching me up felt it necessary to describe in detail how these kinds of injuries don't usually bleed as much as mine. This is my best and worst put together. My friend had an old Prince Albert scar that he shot bottle rockets out of when he got drunk. One party he was in my kitchen and shot a bottle rocket out of his junk and it flew right through the living room. It hit my other friend right in the forehead and exploded just as he opened the front door to enter the party. He got a cut on his forehead and was freaked out and angry until we explained, and then he almost died laughing. We sure were young and dumb. In short, my friend shot a bottle rocket out of his Johnson and accidentally hit my other friend in the face with it. To clarify, until Googling just now, the narrator thought that a bottle rocket was a small firework of some sort, and this story had a completely different tone when you think it's a guy blasting pyrotechnics out of his junk, and imagining the scarring that he was causing. This is still a wild story anyway, but it feels tamer now that I know a bottle rocket is powered by compressed air and not gunpowder. Someone stole my only bottle of 2009 Dogfish Head 120-minute IPA from my cooler. This is a highly limited, yearly release beer that costs $10 to $15 for one little bottle, and I was saving it for that night, my birthday. Apparently they didn't like it because the next morning I found it open, but full on the bathroom counter. I was at a party with a girl who I was very interested in, and she was very interested in me. Even though we weren't on a date, we were together, telepathically and ocularly screwing the entire night. The night started with tequila, salt, and lime. A Mexican's wet dream. However, given our underage stomachs, our light statures, and our intolerance to booze, we were prone to disaster. And that's exactly what happened. After about 5 or 6 tequila shots, Alberta and I were feeling rather randy. Excited and youthful, imminent flirting occurred and I wanted to impress this girl by bringing us more drinks. You know, to show her how manly I am because I can consume an excess amount of alcohol. We were drinking Rolling Rock bottles in the basement gathered around a table filled with empty bottles, and recklessly throwing these beers back trying to impress one another. After about 3 or 4, we were indubitably hammered. What happened next will never leave my mind for the rest of my life. Alberta turned ashen, and then like a chameleon, camouflaging itself in a tree, her skin transformed into a green color. She sprayed a fountain of projectile chuck all over myself, the table, and herself in a matter of about 2 seconds. I still remember the taste and smell of her lunch because it sprayed on my face, presumably corned beef on rye. To make matters worse, because she was hammered and embarrassed, she stumbled onto the table, causing an eruption of glass to shatter amidst the ground. Subsequently, she fell into the pile of broken glass, cutting herself worse than a knife-hungry, angsty emo listening to Hawthorne Heights. So now she was covered in blood and spew, and I was standing there sporting her lunch without the slightest clue of what to do next. Everyone's eyes were on her. Little did I know, Alberta is one of those girls that's extremely sensitive to blood, and even mentioning the word makes her queasy. It didn't help that she had the freaking Seine River of red running down her leg either. Amidst all of this commotion, she fainted on the ground and started to tremble. That's when the worst part happened. She dispersed a freaking chocolate mudslide out of her butt, and it dripped down her legs and onto the ground like a fondue fountain. So, here's this girl covered in spew, bleeding like a fiend, and crapping herself all over the floor of my buddy's house. I helped her up, grabbed her some paper towels and a water, and made sure she was conscious and going to survive. And I dipped the scene faster than Colton Harris Moore evaded the FBI. 3 years have passed, and I haven't seen or heard from her since. Sister came home from a hard night of partying and apparently had taken 4 consecutive shots of Wild Turkey 101 as she was leaving. Minutes later, my brother came bounding out of her bedroom saying, "You've got to see this, dude." We go into her bathroom to find her passed out in the fetal position, 1 foot from the loo, with her skirt, but not panties, pulled halfway down her knees, and a large, firm turd halfway protruding from her undies, resting gently on the inside of her thigh. We then called her boyfriend to come clean up Mrs. Turd Lady. He comes over, cleans her up and puts her to bed, at which point she begins to chuck up all over herself and her white sheets, creating a pink, chunky river leading to the edge of her bed, resulting in a smelly, putrid waterfall. I put a bucket under the waterfall and go to sleep. At a party when I was about 19 with my girlfriend, she got a call from her friend who was on a date and needed to be picked up. I was sober, so my girlfriend and I went to go get her. The friend was hammered and got in the back seat. She started crying about how the guy dumped her after she gave him a down-under kiss and even swallowed. She kept burping and saying, "Oh God, I could still taste him." We drove to the girlfriend's place and her friend rinsed her mouth out with scope and chewed a half-pack of gum. Then the 3 of us went back to the original party. After a couple of hours, the guy who dumped her shows up at the party. The friend starts drinking even more. After about an hour of this, she goes up to him to try and talk things out. She opens her mouth to speak and she hurls all over him. She was taller than him, so she got his face and chest. My girlfriend yells across the room, "Holy crap, she just snowballed him!" The room got quiet. The guy loses it. He smacked the friend so hard she flew backwards and bounced off the wall. And then he started to kick the wall, and he threw a lamp into the TV and hurled the stereo through the window. All the while, the girls are saying, "Somebody stop him!" But unfortunately, we'd all been told privately that the friend had gone south of the border on him, and we all knew that along with the chunks on him, he had his own baby batter all over his shirt, so we weren't going to touch him. After a couple of minutes, he just left. He got arrested a few hours later at his house, did some restitution and community service, and had the name Chucky Snowball until he went to college. In short, girl goes south of the border on a guy and swallows, and then he dumps her. They met at a party later, she chucks his own splooge back up on him, and he goes berserk, earning a new nickname and criminal record. My friend and I rented a hotel suite to have a New Year's Eve party. We were all set to have an awesome night with about 15 people coming over. One of our friends, we'll call him John Doe to protect the guilty, called the front desk at 8 p.m. and asked them to give a message to us indicating he wouldn't be able to make it to the party. So the hotel manager calls and says the following in broken English. "Are you ready to party? John Doe can't make it to party. No party allowed in room." We had to cancel and sat in the room in disbelief at how our friend just ruined our party by trying to be thoughtful. Have you ever heard of a flaming Dr. Pepper? You pour a shot with amaretto and Everclear, light it on fire, drop it in a Coors Light, and down the whole thing at once. It does taste like Dr. Pepper and is a great way to get smashed. Anyway, I saw a guy spill the shot after he lit it on the tile floor of the kitchen. The frickin' tile floor was on fire, that and he spilled booze. Double party foul. What pranks did you play on your school using the IT computers? Used an altered version of a JavaScript web browser hack that turns all of the pictures shown into pictures of French toast. Rotated monitors 90 degrees in graphics card settings. I did this a lot in primary school until my teachers sat me down for hacking the system and I was almost suspended. My school district used Macs pretty much everywhere. A couple of the most common pranks. There was a key combination that would invert all of the colors on the screen. If I recall correctly, it was the meta keys and 8. It was a lot of fun to do this to someone who left their computer unattended and didn't know that. Then one of the function keys, I think F11, would move all of the windows to the outer edge of the screen, showing the desktop. Pushing it again moved them back, but there was an animation associated with both of the movements. If you held Shift while tapping F11, it would do the same thing but with the animation slowed down. The thing is, it didn't matter if the animation had completed or not, the machine would queue up another action for each time you hit F11, but wouldn't cancel the animation in progress. So, if you were quick enough and someone wasn't paying attention, talking to their neighbor, looking at a book, etc., you could lean over, spam Shift plus F11 a few times, and effectively force them to watch all of their windows slide in and out at a snail's pace for a minute or two. Took the Windows startup sound, edited in 8 minutes of dead air, then edited in 15 seconds of bedroom noises. Made that the new startup sound. Ah, yes. Back in grade 6, this kid decided to write XXX a bunch of times in a Word document, then turn up his volume up to max and have the computer read it out. Cue 24 11-year-olds laughing as his computer yells out a naughty word over and over. Putting an S after the HTTP part in the web address bar. It bypassed the school firewall. I felt like an awesome hacker. My God. You mean that was all that was holding me back from complete browser freedom when my friends and I were just spending all our lunch breaks in the computer lab instead of out in the sun? I feel so cheated. It probably doesn't work anymore though. I remember at my old school someone managed to disable the H key on lots of the computers. If you were typing and tried to press H, you'd get an error message saying like, "Sorry, but the H key on this computer is currently disabled. Please try again later. The H key is disabled. Type help to fix it." Control, Alt, and directional arrow flipped the screens different directions. I stopped when I was told that I could permanently mess up the computers. And then I started again in college. I did this to a friend and she didn't know how to undo it, so she turned her laptop sideways to Google how to fix it. I did that in grade school. They had to pay a computer technician to come in. He said that there was a virus and it wasn't fixable, and left. I flipped it back the next day. When my school got smaller, more modern monsters, I'd flip the screen upside down, but also turn the monster upside down so it looked normal. Oh, I mean monitors. Autocorrect is a birch sometimes. Unplug mouse from the back of computers 1 and 2. Switch the plugs, but leave the mice where they are. Mouse in front of computer 1 is now plugged into computer 2 and vice versa. Watch the hilarity ensue. Ah, IT teachers, those jerks that provide me with job security. We'd take a screenshot of the desktop as it was, then delete all of the items off the desktop, then make the screenshot we took the wallpaper. We'd watch people futilely click on the wallpaper and enjoy. Something else we'd try on occasion, since we were in graphic design class and had access to the necessary programs, besides Paint, was create fake window warning and dialog boxes. We'd make them say things like, delete computer? Or delete hard drive? Or something else completely obnoxious like that. Then we'd just remove the no option or make both options say yes. When it was done, we'd add it to the wallpaper that's already on the computer so it looks like there's a real dialog box that's popped onto the screen. This only worked once or twice that I remember. I think we fooled the programming teacher who was really just the baseball coach teaching a class in order to remain as the coach. It's harder to get someone with this one, but it's equally funny. Our school had a standard wrong password 3 times lockout rule. Given the IT teacher was a stone's throw from retirement, he wasn't the quickest. I think we managed 3 lockouts in one session. Our school network ran on Windows for Workgroups 3.0. Machines were locked down so you couldn't run your own programs on them. However, we discovered if you put a modified win-ini file that allowed you to install your own programs in a network drive that came before where the lockdown version was stored, it would use that and you could install stuff. And that was my first introduction to Doom multiplayer. Somebody threw a Molotov cocktail into the window of a computer lab at my school. It was over a weekend, thankfully, so nobody was there, but it destroyed all of the computers in the room. My friend and I got blamed for it because the teacher whose lab it was thought that we didn't like her. Which, that's true. Thankfully, our alibi was that we were on a plane flying back from a school exchange trip to Belgium when the damage occurred. There were several teachers on the flight to corroborate our story. That and, plane tickets. I used to play the hidden XL97 flight simulator during my boring high school typing class. Joke's on me because I still can't type properly. I rendered all of the school's computers unusably slow for a day by putting hundreds of millions of copies of a picture of a fat frog onto the shared hard drive, filling it completely. If you had the patience to sit there until your computer logged on, you still couldn't save or do anything. Back when the mice had those little tracking balls on the bottom, we'd remove the balls and leave the rest of the mouse. As a side note, does this count as neutering computer mice? Nothing malicious, really, just bypassing the security BS and playing a lot of StarCraft. Soundboards. Holy crap, were we little demons in middle school with those things. My personal favorites were either Arnold Schwarzenegger or Pulp Fiction. When the teacher would ask if there were any questions, from the back of the class you would hear in a thunderous voice, "Who is your daddy and what does he do?" followed by an eruption of laughter. Also, following up any time the teacher said, "That's correct," with "Correctamundo." If you're reading this, Miss Jadish, I'm so sorry. Oh yeah, almost forgot. Some kid found a way to print from all the computers in school from one computer. So naturally, someone printed 800 copies of a picture of a turd to all the computers in the school. 'Twas known as Brown Thursday. Our IT was crap at our school. If you knew the specific computer number, you could make it shut down only using the Windows command exe. The staff stopped seeing the fun in it when we found the principal's computer number. My middle school, which had Windows XP, had a startup folder from a network share. Except they forgot to remove write permissions for students on the drive. It was a teacher share. We added a startup script to open and close the drive. A couple of days later, every computer in the library was marked as out of order. It's wild to think that I would have gladly done any and all of these and laughed when I was in school, but little crapbags like me were causing absolute nightmares for school's poor IT workers who were just trying to go by one day without kids finding their ways to print butts directly onto the staff room printers. I just put a bunch of strange messages in autoexec.bat. Every time the thing would boot up, you'd get a quote like, "Do not look behind you," or "The package has been delivered. It's in locker number," and then I'd give a random unused locker number. Or something like that would pop up. Also the command, on startup, run paint. On open paint, renders the computer unusable for a 2007 high school IT professional. This probably shows my age, but we'd open BASIC and write a little program that went something like this. 10 lprint you suck, 20 go to 10. Then we'd edit the shortcut to a popular program like Microsoft Word to link to this program instead. When an unsuspecting user clicked to open what they thought was a legit program, instead they'd be treated to the dot matrix printer screeching out, "You suck! You suck! You suck!" forever. The only way to stop it was to find and terminate the program. Powering down the printer and turning it back on again wouldn't do it. My high school had a program on all of the computers that would allow the teachers to watch an entire classroom's screens, take control of them, and send content to them, among other things. A friend of mine came up with an idea to try and use it to prank the classroom, being the genius 16-year-olds that we were. So when my teacher wasn't looking, I put a USB stick into her computer and copied her spy program exe directory onto it to take a look at what was different between the teacher and student versions. Turns out all you needed to make the student version a teacher version was a 25-character license key that was in a plain text file. So obviously, I copied it and upgraded my client to a controller using all of my teacher's settings. We then proceeded to rickroll the classroom on full volume from 34 computers, which was pretty great. At the end of the class, we came up with another great idea. What would happen if we took control of our teacher's computer and messed with her? So we connected to her computer, but she had been watching our screen from her screen. So for about 5 seconds, we see a bottomless pit of our screen in her screen mirrors over and over and over. After about 5 seconds, our PC fans got super loud and then shut off. When we tried to turn it back on, it was a black screen with only a flashing underscore in the top left corner. That PC had to be re-imaged by district tech support. Still not sure what caused that. Me and a friend replaced our computer science teacher's My Computer icon with a shutdown shortcut displaying a "Mwahahaha" message for 3 seconds before turning off the computer. She clicked it 3 times. Wasn't really the sharpest arrow in the quiver. Some guy has been updating a games folder on the school's public H drive. None of the teachers or tech support guys can get rid of it or set it up so that we can't use it. No one knows where it came from except it's been there since forever. It has Counter-Strike 1.6, Day of Defeat, Halo Combat Evolved, a Halo ODST emulator that actually works. I too have questions. Roller Coaster Tycoon, Team Fortress Classic, Doom, KOTOR, Minecraft, Old School RuneScape, Elder Scrolls Morrowind, and a few others. Like a lot of people suggested, I went and looked at the games folder to try and copy it. Much to my dismay and others, the folder is now almost gutted, excluding a proxy program, Halo Combat Evolved, Undertale, and Counter-Strike. I guess they got wise to us. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. In 1998, this idiot bought like 5 scanned adult magazines on a floppy disk and decided to open them in computer class. Suspended on the spot. I have no idea what the frick he expected to happen. Guess he was thinking with his hard drive, not his floppy disk, if you know what I'm saying. Well, we moved all of the abacus beads to one side. Yes, I'm older than most Redditors. When I went to school, electricity wasn't invented yet. We used candles to watch TV. I'd always switch the buttons on the keyboards to spell naughty words. I'd discovered a way to disable the teacher's view of my computer. After logging in, I simply unplugged the internet cable that connected me to the school server. The spy program would appear in the toolbar. I'd simply exit the program and reconnect the internet cord. My screen would just appear totally black on their screen. The teacher was kind of impressed I was able to find a way to disable it. She only warned me to not do it again. In 5th grade, I found out you could set words to autocorrect to whatever you want in MS Word. Then Word got out and suddenly half of the words you typed on any computer would autocorrect to "I love D in my butt lololololololol." The teachers were horrified. 4 words. Nicolas Cage Chrome extension. I'd always take the little rollerball out of the bottoms of the mice, guaranteed an afternoon of entertainment every time. We figured out we could make the computer sound like chainsaws by putting a handful of quarters into the CD drive. Then we did it a lot. Shift and print screen to capture desktop, open Paint, Ctrl-V, rotate image upside down and save, set image as desktop background, auto-hide taskbar. On desktop, right-click, view, uncheck, show desktop icons, laugh at random victims attempting to use the computer. This is a combination of 2 of the more common pranks found here, the monitor rotation and the desktop picture replacement. Totally the kind that me and my idiot friends would do and then immediately get caught because we were peeking and laughing over our big box monitors. In 2001, I think, friends and I installed StarCraft deep in my school's file network, accessible on every computer in the building, and we had it programmed to run without a disk. You'd still need a CD key to play, but hacked and false CD keys were really easy back in the day. We passed out false CD keys to those who knew to ask us. And since it was all on the shared network, you could LAN from basically anywhere in the building. This was right around the time when computers were becoming really prevalent in schools. Not just with computer labs, but many classes now had multiple computers or were specifically just on computers. So we'd end up organizing these pretty large StarCraft battles across the school. Even got to the point where, in drafting class, where the teacher absolutely didn't care what we were doing, it even got to the point where my 2 friends and I, massive nerds if that wasn't obvious, would play some of the jocks in the class who loved StarCraft. We didn't just break into the system to have fun, we also broke down barriers to make life better. We also doctored a local newspaper article to look like it was a story about how our principal, who was out on medical leave for back surgery after he fell off a roof, was actually on leave because a gerbil got stuck in his butt, and his wife lit a match to look down the insertion tube to try and see if she could see the gerbil, and the tunnel of methane ignited in a small explosion, giving his butt cavity third-degree burns. The gerbil survived, singed and exhausted, but otherwise okay. We then printed it off and passed it around the school. In hindsight, that was a pretty messed up thing to do. I changed the screensaver from liberal arts by putting an F in front of arts. Oh boy, we pretty much ran the network. It was up or down at our whim. The entire network used hubs, and this was right as routers were becoming a thing, so they weren't yet economical. We'd shut down the entire network with a repeated ping command in DOS set to max packet size. It was far too simple. We wouldn't usually do it for long, just enough for everyone to think it was a hiccup and to see if we could. Our computer class was actually really awesome. The assigned modules were easy, and once we were finished, our teacher would let us do our own thing. Turns out, our school had an entire computer graveyard. We'd go in there, find parts, and build entire computers. Eventually, we had a separate network of 8 or 10 machines that we used exclusively for Quake 2 and the original Halo. One day, the school came in and removed our separate gaming computers. We were angry. The network was down for quite some time. So, computer class for most of grade school was nothing more than endless typing classes. She sells seashells by the seashore and other tongue twisters to get us practicing home rows and typing quickly. Absolutely mind-numbingly dull. Sure, getting to play Commander Keen or Wolfenstein after was nice, but the reward was nowhere near worth the effort to reach it, and the teacher would constantly get frustrated with me ditching home rows and finishing faster and more accurately without them. So one day, with us both being frustrated with each other, I restarted the computer and opened the BIOS setup utility and started changing random settings to random values. Yes, I was a vindictive child. Yeah, I was a typing pro due to my online gaming habits back in middle school, like StarCraft, Diablo 2, Warcraft 3, the others. I got my teacher into a deal that if I could accurately finish the entire course curriculum in 4 classes, then I could play Oregon Trail for the rest of the year. A lot of settlers died from dysentery that semester. To the dumb student who tried to mess with the school computers by shoving paper into the CD tray, don't use paper with your class schedule, full name, and ID number on it. Idiot. I did that on purpose. And that teacher didn't have my name or ID number on it. You fell for a classic one. I never did anything to damage computers, just circumvent security measures. Using standalone browsers or games from a flash drive, using said browsers or proxies to get around web filters, installing programs and games in the C-root directory, since most group policy or other security measures wouldn't stop something from executing from there. Finally, I can contribute. I was in college, in a classroom, waiting my turn to an exam, which was held in another room. Bored out of my mind, behind me was a PC. I saw a red button that said 220. I say out loud, "What does this button do?" and press the button. The button now says 150 and a loud bang and smoke comes from inside the PC unit. I'd turned the PC power supply from 220 volts to 150, which toasted it. The room was full with my colleagues. Everyone looks at me in disbelief. I begin to laugh out loud, not believing what just happened. Luckily, nobody told on me to the professor, who was a pretty grouchy guy. I managed to install Linux on almost 90% of all computers at the school at once. There were several flaws in the network that I discovered over the years that let me essentially ruin, to the IT department at least, over 110 of their machines. Firstly, since these were mostly Macs, I was able to abuse their poorly configured guest account system to gain screen sharing access to any Mac that was currently logged in, regardless of the account that was currently in use. Second, the IT department set up some sort of program that would read a script file, then update the Macs according to the file via single-user mode, I think. I modified one of the update scripts to a Linux image instead of an OS X update. I can't remember what I did, but I think there were specifically modified images that will install a default system state silently, requiring no user input other than the parameters for the disk partition when being run in the command line. that somehow worked. So essentially, the next scheduled update completely messed the school by installing an OS that nobody knew how to use. It was glorious, and apparently it was cheaper to toss the Macs and buy new ones than pay the IT department to actually reinstall OS X by hand. Whatever, I got a ton of free Macs that day. Unexpectedly good outcome. I think it was in 2004, my IT teacher let me use an old laptop for a project. Inside it was a floppy disk with the username and password for all users on the learning platform we used, including teachers. The rest of the semester I logged into the teachers' accounts, found the hand-ins from the best students, downloaded and made it my own, and handed it in from my own account. Never got busted, but I realized I used almost the same time altering assignments as I could have if I just made my own. Also, had some fun with the Let Me Rule Trojan from time to time. You people are what prevents me from being able to finish my coffee in the morning. Damn you all. Not school, but many years ago when I was a hapless little bag of crap, I was walking by a couple of computers in one of those "we sell anything" cheap stores. There was one on an end cap, it was running 95 or 3.1, I can't remember. So I logged out, opened DOS and said, "Format C," and walked away. I'm sure I've paid for it over the years in karma. My friend and I entered into the operating system itself a virus that would essentially hunt through email accounts with .edu addresses, so all teachers and admin, and display a picture of two women doing the deed. If the operator clicked more than 10 times, a video started. If the operator clicked more than 20 times, the noise started. The only way to get rid of it was pretty simple: Control-Alt-Delete and use taskbar to shut it down. Not that complex, obviously. Although, to be honest, I didn't do a lot of programming. I did some of the basics, however. I mostly did the strategic planning of how we were actually going to get it done and implement it. My friend's dad was a programmer and a hobbyist hacker, so he actually helped my friend design it. I still find it hilarious that his dad was willing to screw with the teachers. He must have really hated our school a lot. However, most teachers didn't know that. They didn't know who did it, but it was hilarious. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.